think slowly, update quickly. Thinking slowly is the art of resisting the instinct to react before your mind has caught up with your emotions. It is the discipline of holding yourself still while the world around you pushes for instant answers, instant opinions, instant certainty. When you think slowly, you create space. Space to see the full picture instead of the first impulse. Space to recognize your own bias before it blinds you. Space to let your thoughts mature instead of erupt. Most people are terrified of that quiet pause because it exposes how little of their thinking is actually their own. But in that pause, you gain something they don't: control. You start understanding situations with a depth that unsettles others because your clarity is not rushed, not reactive, not fragile. Updating quickly is the opposite of stagnation. It is the willingness to abandon outdated beliefs the moment better information appears. It means you are not chained to your past, not enslaved by your ego, not afraid to admit that your previous understanding was incomplete. Most people cling to their opinions because they fear the humiliation of being wrong. You, however, recognize the greater humiliation is refusing to grow. Changing your mind becomes a form of strength, not shame. Together, thinking slowly and updating quickly turn you into a force people don't know how to handle. You're impossible to manipulate because you don't react on command, and impossible to outgrow because you evolve too fast for anyone to predict. Your mind becomes a moving target, calm, deliberate, and always sharpening, and that quiet power unsettles those who rely on the comfort of their static beliefs. Spend time alone. Spending time alone is not isolation. It is the moment your mind finally stops performing for the world and starts revealing the truths you've been too distracted to hear. Most people fear solitude because it strips away the noise that protects them from themselves. But when you choose to be alone on purpose, you enter a space where your thoughts stop competing with outside voices, where you can actually hear your instincts, your fears, your desires, and the parts of you that have been whispering beneath the chaos. Solitude is where your real identity begins to form, not the version shaped by social expectations or the approval of others, but the version that stands when no one is watching. In silence, your mind strengthens. You discover what you truly think instead of what you've been conditioned to think. You learn to regulate your emotions without external reassurance, to enjoy your own presence, to confront your weaknesses without running from them. This self-confrontation is uncomfortable, even frightening, because it exposes everything you've been avoiding. But it is also the birthplace of clarity, resilience, and self-mastery. Over time, being alone stops feeling empty and starts feeling powerful. You begin to enjoy the depth it brings, the way it sharpens your intuition, the way it builds independence in a world addicted to constant validation. People start noticing the difference too. They sense the stability in you, the groundedness, the quiet confidence of someone who doesn't need noise to feel whole. And once you grow comfortable in your own solitude, no one can use loneliness to control you. Do hard things on purpose. Doing hard things on purpose is the deliberate choice to step into discomfort instead of waiting for life to force it on you. Most people spend their entire lives avoiding pain, effort, and challenge, believing comfort will protect them. But comfort doesn't protect. It weakens. When you intentionally choose the harder path, something inside you begins to shift. You stop viewing obstacles as threats and start seeing them as invitations to grow into a stronger version of yourself. Hard things expose your limits, and instead of collapsing at those edges, you begin expanding them. The act of willingly embracing difficulty rewires your mind. It teaches your brain that fear isn't a stop sign, just a signal that you're entering unfamiliar territory. And in that territory, you discover capacities you never knew you had. Your resilience thickens, your confidence deepens, and your tolerance for discomfort becomes a quiet weapon most people never develop. You start trusting yourself, not because life is easy, but because you've proven, through sweat, discipline, and sacrifice that you can endure what others avoid. Every hard thing you choose becomes a message to yourself. I am not fragile. That message compounds. Soon, challenges that once intimidated you shrink, and tasks that break others barely shake you. People sense this difference. They feel the steadiness in your presence, the controlled intensity of someone who doesn't run from difficulty but absorbs it, processes it, and grows stronger because of it. Choosing hard things isn't about punishment. It's about shaping a mind powerful enough that hardship no longer scares you. Finish what you start. Finishing what you start is the discipline that separates those who dream from those who transform. Most people live in a loop of excitement followed by abandonment, enthusiastic beginnings with no follow-through. Every unfinished project quietly teaches the brain that quitting is acceptable, that effort can be discarded the moment it becomes uncomfortable. But when you force yourself to finish, even when motivation has evaporated, you rewrite that script. You teach your mind that your word holds weight, that your commitment is stronger than your impulses, that you are someone who follows through regardless of mood or difficulty. The power of finishing lies in what it builds inside you. Each completion becomes a brick in the foundation of self-trust, the kind that can't be faked or borrowed. When you finish something you once wanted to quit, you feel the shift, a deep, grounded certainty that you can endure, persist, and deliver. That kind of inner solidity is rare. It intimidates people who rely on bursts of motivation instead of sustained discipline. Finishing sharpens your identity. It forces you to face boredom, frustration, and doubt, and still move forward. It strips away the illusion that greatness is born from inspiration rather than endurance. Over time, you start viewing obstacles not as excuses to stop, but as necessary steps toward completion. And the more you finish, the more unstoppable you become. People sense this in you, the unshakable steadiness, the quiet force of someone who closes the gap between intention and reality, someone whose actions do not fade but follow through until the end. Take constant notes. Taking constant notes is the act of catching your thoughts before they disappear into the chaos of your mind. Most people let ideas drift in and out of their awareness like passing shadows, never realizing how much wisdom, clarity, and insight they lose simply because they didn't bother to capture it. But when you write things down the moment they strike, ideas, observations, emotions, patterns, you begin turning your mind into a living archive of your own evolution. Notes become the footprints of your thoughts, proof of what you're learning, proof of what you're becoming. There is power in seeing your own mind on paper. It forces you to slow down, to articulate what you feel, to confront what you know and what you don't. It reveals connections you didn't notice, contradictions you've been avoiding, habits you didn't realize you had. The moment you write something, it shifts from vague intuition into something tangible, something you can analyze, refine, or discard with intention. Taking notes also trains your brain to pay attention. You start noticing details others overlook, hearing what others miss, capturing insights others forget. Over time, this habit sharpens your memory, heightens your awareness, and turns you into someone who carries clarity wherever you go. Your notes become your private conversation with yourself, a place where your thoughts don't have to perform. And when you revisit them, you get to witness your own growth, your own patterns, your own brilliance, forming quietly in the background. Most people assume they'll remember the important things. You know better. You don't rely on memory, you build one. And that discipline becomes a silent advantage that compounds every single day. Review your notes weekly. Reviewing your notes weekly is the process of turning scattered information into permanent intelligence. Most people take notes but never revisit them, leaving their knowledge to fade like forgotten conversations. But when you sit down once a week and deliberately walk through everything you've captured, ideas, lessons, observations, mistakes, you're forcing your mind to reconnect with what would have disappeared into mental dust. This repetition strengthens neural pathways, turning temporary thoughts into lasting understanding. Reviewing becomes a ritual of sharpening, a moment where your brain retrieves what it once stored and reinforces it with deeper clarity. There is something unexpectedly emotional about this practice too. As you revisit your own thoughts, you see patterns, progress, and truths you didn't recognize in the moment. You witness how your thinking has evolved, how your struggles have shaped you, how your observations hold more meaning than you realized at first glance. It becomes a quiet conversation with your past self, a journey through the inner world you often ignore. Over time, weekly reviews build a mind that never stops improving. You start connecting ideas across weeks, across months, across experiences. You become someone who remembers what others forget, someone whose thoughts grow layered and interconnected instead of scattered and reactive. People feel it when they speak to you, the depth, the recall, the clarity of someone whose mind is not cluttered but curated. Reviewing your notes weekly transforms raw information into personal power, making your thinking sharper, your memory stronger, and your awareness far more expansive than the average person ever reaches. Delay gratification. Delaying gratification is the discipline of choosing long-term power over short-term pleasure, and it is one of the rarest abilities in a world addicted to instant reward. Most people live at the mercy of their impulses, chasing whatever feels good in the moment, never realizing that every easy choice quietly steals strength from their future. But when you deliberately pause before indulging, something profound happens. You begin teaching your mind that desire is not a command. You learn that urges pass, cravings fade, and impulses lose control the moment you stop obeying them. This resistance reshapes you. Each time you deny yourself the quick hit of satisfaction, you build a deeper capacity for patience, discipline, and emotional stability. Your mind becomes sharper because it is no longer ruled by the frantic pull of immediacy. Instead, you start valuing outcomes that require endurance, mastery, success, self-respect. The rewards you earn through restraint feel different. They're heavier, more meaningful, rooted in effort rather than escape. People notice it too. They sense the self-control in the way you speak, the calmness in how you make decisions, the quiet confidence of someone who doesn't crumble under temptation. While others chase the fleeting rush of now, you cultivate the power of later, and that shift makes you mentally unshakable. Delayed gratification is not about deprivation. It's about proving to yourself that your future matters more than your impulses, and that realization changes everything. Ask better questions. Asking better questions is the skill that turns ordinary thinkers into dangerous ones. Most people ask shallow, surface-level questions, the kind that confirm what they already believe or keep conversations comfortably predictable. But when you start asking deeper, sharper, more precise questions, you change the way your mind processes reality. A good question disrupts assumptions, exposes hidden motives, and forces both you and others to confront truths that are often avoided. This is why powerful questions make people uneasy. They strip away the illusion of certainty and demand real thought instead of rehearsed answers. When you ask better questions, you shift the energy of every interaction. You stop accepting information at face value. You dig, you peel, you explore the why behind the what. Each question becomes a doorway into layers most people never bother to uncover. Your curiosity becomes a kind of quiet authority, a signal that you refuse to live on autopilot, that your mind is not content with shortcuts or superficial explanations. People feel this when you speak. They sense the precision, the intention, the mental sharpness behind your inquiry. Better questions also turn inward. They force you to confront your own contradictions, your fears, your patterns, and the beliefs you inherited without examining. Asking yourself the right question at the right moment can expose an entire lifetime of false assumptions. It can break illusions, reveal truth, and redirect your path in an instant. Over time, this habit reshapes you. You become someone who sees deeper, thinks clearer, and understands faster. And that level of awareness makes others feel like you're operating on a wavelength they can't fully access. Surround yourself with sharp minds. Surrounding yourself with sharp minds is one of the fastest, most unforgiving ways to elevate your own thinking. The people you choose to be close to act as mirrors, reflecting the limits of your current intelligence or the possibilities of what you could become. When you spend time with those who think deeply, question boldly, and refuse to settle for surface-level understanding, their intensity begins to shape you. Their standards become your standards. Their discipline exposes your excuses. Their insight forces you to confront the parts of your mind you've allowed to soften. Being around sharper minds can feel uncomfortable at first, almost threatening, because it pulls you out of the illusion that you're already doing enough. Their presence silently demands you level up, think cleaner, speak clearer, learn faster. This pressure isn't meant to break you, it's meant to sharpen you. The conversations are different. The energy is different. You can feel your mind stretching just by trying to keep up. And every moment spent in that environment becomes a subtle transformation, turning you into someone who no longer tolerates intellectual laziness in yourself or anyone else. Sharp minds don't let you stagnate. They challenge your beliefs, poke holes in weak arguments, and push you to refine the way you see the world. They expose your blind spots, not to belittle you, but to make your thinking stronger. And as your mind adapts to the level around you, you begin to carry that sharpness everywhere you go. Suddenly, mediocrity feels unbearable, shallow conversations feel suffocating, and you start craving depth the way others crave comfort. Surrounding yourself with sharp minds is not just a choice, it's a declaration of who you intend to become. Listen more than you speak. Listening more than you speak is one of the most underestimated forms of power because silence makes people reveal truths they never intended to share. When you choose to listen first, you give others the illusion of control, the feeling that their voice is the center of the moment. But beneath that surface, something deeper happens. You begin gathering information, emotions, intentions, and patterns that most people miss because they're too busy waiting for their turn to talk. True listening isn't passive, it is strategic awareness. It allows you to read the gaps between words, the shifts in tone, the hesitations that expose insecurities, the excitement that reveals desires, the contradictions that uncover hidden motives. When you speak less, your presence becomes more impactful. People lean in when you finally decide to talk because your words carry weight. They are not diluted by constant noise. You become the person whose silence makes others curious, whose attention feels valuable, whose understanding feels rare. And the more you listen, the more you begin to see people as they truly are, not as they pretend to be. Listening builds emotional intelligence too. It forces you to step outside yourself and into someone else's world, sharpening your empathy and your ability to navigate complex human dynamics. Over time, you develop a calmness that others can't quite explain, a grounded confidence that comes from knowing far more than you reveal. People start trusting you, confiding in you, relying on you, because your silence makes them feel heard. And in a world full of voices fighting to be noticed, the person who listens becomes the one everyone ends up following. Explain ideas. Simply explaining ideas simply is the mark of someone who truly understands their own mind. Most people hide behind complicated words and tangled explanations, not because they are intelligent, but because they are unclear. Simplicity exposes whether you actually grasp a concept or are just repeating it. When you strip an idea down to its essence and express it in a way anyone can understand, you're demonstrating mastery. And mastery has a presence that people feel immediately. Simplicity forces you to untangle your thoughts, to remove ego and noise, to confront the core truth beneath the complexity. That process is uncomfortable because it reveals how much you don't know. But once you break through that discomfort, something powerful happens. Your communication becomes sharp, memorable, and undeniable. People lean in when you speak because they can feel the clarity in your words. They understand you without effort, and that ease creates trust. Explaining things simply is also an emotional act. It shows you care enough to make your message accessible, not intimidating. It shows you respect the listener's mind rather than trying to overshadow it. And when people feel understood instead of overwhelmed, they connect with you on a deeper level. Over time, simplicity becomes your advantage. While others drown in jargon and complexity, your ideas land instantly, cutting through confusion like a blade. You become the person who brings order to chaos, who translates the world for others, who turns the abstract into the obvious. In a culture obsessed with sounding smart, the one who speaks simply stands out as someone who actually is. Protect your focus. Protecting your focus is the act of defending the most valuable currency your mind possesses, its ability to lock onto one thing with depth and intensity. Most people let their attention get hijacked by every notification, every impulse, every distraction disguised as urgency. Their minds are constantly being pulled apart, scattered into pieces they never reclaim. But when you choose to protect your focus, you draw a boundary around your mental energy, an invisible shield that says not everything deserves access to your mind. This decision changes you. It sharpens your thinking, strengthens your discipline, and gives you an edge in a world where diluted attention is the norm. Focus is power because it creates momentum. When your mind commits fully to a single task, something shifts inside you. Thoughts become clearer, ideas connect more naturally, and progress accelerates in ways that feel almost unfair. You stop wasting energy on distractions that offer comfort but steal potential. You begin experiencing what most people rarely feel anymore: deep work, mental immersion, the high of creating instead of consuming. People sense this focus in you. They feel the intensity behind your presence, the clarity behind your decisions, the discipline behind your actions. A focused mind is intimidating because it is uncontrollable. No one can pull you in every direction or manipulate your attention with noise. Protecting your focus makes you more selective, more intentional, and far more effective. Over time, it becomes a silent form of strength, turning your attention into a weapon instead of a weakness, and setting you apart from a world that cannot sit still. Rewrite long-term goals. Rewriting your long-term goals is the act of refusing to let your future be shaped by outdated versions of yourself. Most people set goals once and cling to them out of habit or pride, even when they no longer match who they are becoming. But when you consistently rewrite your long-term goals, you are acknowledging something most people never dare to face. Growth changes you, and your ambitions must evolve with that growth. Each time you revisit your goals, you confront your shifting desires, your expanding abilities, and the subtle ways your vision sharpens as you gain experience. This process forces honesty. It exposes which goals were built on ego, which were built on fear, and which still resonate with the person you are today. Rewriting your goals keeps your mind from going numb. It pulls you back into alignment, demanding that you stop drifting and start directing your life with precision. The act itself is powerful because it resets your internal compass. It reminds you that your future is not a fixed path, but a constantly unfolding landscape you have the right to redesign. Over time, the more you rewrite, the clearer your trajectory becomes. Your goals stop feeling like distant fantasies and start becoming detailed blueprints of something you can actually build. People who never rewrite their goals remain trapped in an outdated self-image, but you become someone fluid, adaptable, and relentlessly intentional. You stop chasing goals that no longer fit and start pursuing the ones that ignite something deeper: purpose, ambition, hunger. And that evolution creates a quiet pressure around you, the kind that makes others feel like you're always moving forward, always upgrading, always becoming someone they can't quite predict but can't ignore. Master one difficult subject. Mastering one difficult subject is the decision to go deeper than the world ever expects you to. It is the refusal to skim the surface like everyone else who chases easy wins and shallow understanding. When you choose a subject that intimidates you, math, philosophy, neuroscience, coding, physics, you step into territory where most people quit the moment it stops feeling comfortable. But difficulty is exactly what makes it transformative. The more complex the subject, the more it stretches your mind, forcing you to build new mental muscles, new frameworks, new ways of seeing the world. As you push through confusion and frustration, something powerful happens. Your brain adapts. Concepts that once felt impossible begin to click, and each breakthrough hits with a rush that rewires your confidence from the inside out. You learn to think more precisely, more deeply, more creatively. You start noticing patterns in places others overlook, and mastery becomes addictive, not because it's easy, but because you've tasted what it feels like to conquer something most people avoid. The emotional impact is just as profound. Mastering a difficult subject teaches you to trust yourself in the face of complexity. It makes you comfortable feeling lost, knowing clarity always comes to those who persist. People begin to sense this quiet strength in you, the calm focus, the sharp reasoning, the unshakable patience of someone who didn't settle for mediocrity. Your mind becomes trained for depth, for discipline, for the kind of understanding that separates thinkers from imitators. And once you've mastered one difficult subject, you carry that inner power into everything else you touch. Be honest about flaws. Being honest about your flaws is one of the most difficult forms of self-strength because it requires you to confront the parts of yourself you've spent years hiding, denying, or disguising. Most people build their entire identity around avoiding their own imperfections, terrified that acknowledging them will make them weak. But the paradox is brutal and true. The moment you stop running from your flaws is the moment they lose their power over you. When you look directly at your shortcomings, your insecurities, your patterns, your blind spots, you strip them of the shame that has been silently shaping your choices. Honesty becomes liberation. This act of self-truth is emotionally jarring. It feels like peeling away armor you've relied on for years, exposing the raw, unfinished parts of yourself you hope no one would notice. But in that exposure, something rare happens. You begin understanding yourself instead of defending yourself. You start seeing where your behavior comes from, what triggers it, and how it has been silently controlling your reactions. That awareness is painful, but it is also the birthplace of genuine growth. People who are honest about their flaws carry a different kind of confidence, not the loud, fragile kind built on perfection, but a grounded strength built on self-knowledge. They don't crumble under criticism because they've already faced harsher truths from within. They don't pretend to be flawless because they understand that real power comes from clarity, not performance. And when others sense this honesty in you, it disarms them. It makes you more human, more trustworthy, more resilient. Flaws you deny become chains. Flaws you acknowledge become tools. The moment you stop hiding from who you are is the moment you become strong enough to decide who you will become next. Train your attention span. Training your attention span is the process of reclaiming a mental strength the modern world is actively trying to destroy. Most people live in a state of constant fragmentation, jumping from screen to screen, thought to thought, craving tiny bursts of stimulation that leave their minds weaker every day. Attention has become a muscle no one bothers to exercise, and as it deteriorates, so does clarity, patience, creativity, and self-control. But when you choose to train your attention span deliberately, you begin reversing that decay. You force your mind to sit with one task, one idea, one moment, long enough for depth to replace distraction. At first, it feels uncomfortable. Your brain tries to escape, to seek the dopamine hits it has been conditioned to expect. But with repetition, something powerful happens. Your mind strengthens. You become capable of sustained concentration, of sinking into long-form thinking that most people simply can't access anymore. This depth becomes a kind of mental gravity. Ideas connect more fluidly, problems become easier to solve, and creativity flows from places previously blocked by noise. A strong attention span also becomes a shield. It protects you from manipulation, from emotional impulses, from the chaos of a world designed to keep you mentally scattered. People feel this steadiness in you. They sense the controlled presence of someone who can stay locked in while others drift. Training your attention span turns you into a thinker with precision, patience, and power, qualities that make your mind feel sharper, heavier, and far more formidable than the average distracted brain ever realizes. Build mental stamina. Building mental stamina is the deliberate act of training your mind to endure what most people escape. Mental weakness doesn't come from lack of intelligence, but from a lifetime of avoiding anything that stretches the mind past comfort. When you choose to build mental stamina, you are teaching your brain that difficulty is not a threat. It's a signal to become stronger. At first, the effort feels heavy. Your thoughts resist discipline, your focus wavers, and your emotions demand relief. But every time you push a little further, reading longer, thinking deeper, staying present when your mind wants to flee, you expand the limits of what you can mentally hold. Mental stamina forms in the moments you stay with the problem instead of running from it. It forms in the hours you work when you'd rather procrastinate, in the silence you sit through when your thoughts become loud, in the challenges you remain committed to long after the initial motivation fades. With each act of endurance, your mind becomes more resilient, more patient, more unshakable. And this shift is not loud. It's quiet, subtle, almost invisible at first, until people begin to notice that your calm lasts longer than theirs, your focus cuts deeper, and your ability to handle stress feels almost unnatural. As your stamina grows, your mind stops collapsing under pressure. You start thinking clearly in situations that overwhelm others. You stop spiraling when things go wrong. You become the person who doesn't crumble, doesn't rush, doesn't lose themselves. Mental stamina becomes your hidden armor, the silent strength that makes your mind feel like a force that nothing can easily break. Keep promises to yourself. Keeping promises to yourself is the foundation of real inner power, because it's the moment you stop negotiating with your own weakness and start building a mind that trusts its own commands. Most people break their personal commitments so often that their brain stops believing anything they say. Every skipped plan, every abandoned goal, every "I'll start tomorrow" silently trains the mind to expect failure. But when you begin keeping even the smallest promises to yourself, something shifts. You rebuild an internal reputation, one where your word actually means something, even when no one is watching. That self-trust becomes a force that changes the way you walk, speak, and think. Keeping promises to yourself is emotional too. It exposes the parts of you that crave comfort, validation, and excuses. It forces you to confront how easily you betray your own potential. But each time you follow through, you reclaim a piece of yourself that you've been losing to procrastination, fear, and self-doubt. It feels like pulling your identity out of the mud and rebuilding it with sharper edges and stronger bones. Over time, this habit becomes a quiet kind of confidence. You don't need motivation because your actions have become automatic. You don't need external encouragement because you no longer rely on others to hold you accountable. People sense this discipline, your steadiness, your reliability, the way you move with a certainty they haven't earned. Keeping promises to yourself creates a mind that doesn't flinch, doesn't fold, and doesn't break under pressure because it knows it will always follow through. Learn a new language learning. A new language is not just about words, it is about reshaping the way your mind interprets reality. Every language carries its own worldview, its own emotional texture, its own silent rules for how thoughts are formed. When you learn a new one, you aren't just memorizing vocabulary, you are rewiring the architecture of your brain. Most people avoid this challenge because it makes them feel clumsy, exposed, and intellectually vulnerable. But that vulnerability is exactly where transformation begins. As you struggle through unfamiliar sounds and structures, your brain breaks old patterns and builds new neural pathways, strengthening memory, sharpening cognition, and expanding your capacity to think in ways you never have before. The process is humbling. You stumble, mispronounce, confuse meanings, and confront the discomfort of being a beginner again. Yet this humility becomes a powerful emotional teacher. It teaches patience, resilience, and the courage to express yourself imperfectly. It forces you to release the ego that clings to what you already know. And slowly, as the language begins to take root, you feel your mind stretching, reaching into a wider world that was previously locked away from you. Learning a new language also deepens your understanding of people. Suddenly you feel the heartbeat of another culture, the nuance in its humor, the weight in its idioms, the soul in its expression. You realize how many human experiences are universal and how many are beautifully different. Over time, the new language becomes a second lens through which you see the world. It doesn't just broaden your communication, it broadens your identity. It turns you into someone whose mind is flexible, curious, and capable of stepping beyond the familiar, and that shift is something others can feel long before they even know why. Strengthen memory through recall. Strengthening your memory through recall is the act of forcing your mind to retrieve information instead of passively rereading it. And this single shift transforms your brain into something sharper, faster, and far more resilient. Most people mistake familiarity for understanding. They skim, highlight, reread, and convince themselves they've learned something. But the brain only grows when it struggles, when it is pushed to pull information from within rather than absorb it from outside. Recall is that struggle. It is the mental weightlifting that builds neural pathways thicker and stronger than repetition ever could. When you practice recall, you experience a moment of friction, the blank space where your mind reaches, searches, strains. That discomfort is the exact signal that learning is happening. Every attempt pulls the information deeper into your long-term memory, anchoring it so solidly that it becomes part of your thinking rather than something you once read. Over time, your retention sharpens, your recall speed increases, and your ability to connect ideas becomes almost instinctual. People begin to notice the difference. The way you reference details without hesitation, the way your thoughts flow with clarity, the way your mind feels organized and alive. Recall also builds confidence, the real kind, the quiet kind that comes from actually knowing what you claim to know. You stop second-guessing yourself because your knowledge is earned through effort, not illusion. Strengthening your memory through recall doesn't just make you smarter, it makes your mind feel heavier, more anchored, more unshakable. In a world full of forgetfulness and mental fog, you become someone who truly remembers, and that alone sets you apart. Meditate. Meditation is the practice of sitting with yourself long enough to uncover the truth beneath the noise. Most people avoid silence because it forces them to face thoughts they've been burying under distractions, obligations, and constant stimulation. But when you meditate, you strip all of that away. You enter a space where your mind has nowhere to hide and nothing to cling to, and in that raw stillness, you begin to see how chaotic your inner world has become. Meditation is not about emptying the mind. It's about observing it, learning how your thoughts rise, collide, and dissolve. That simple act of witnessing gives you power over them instead of letting them control you. The more you meditate, the more you realize how many of your reactions are automatic, how many emotions you mistake for truth, how often you let your mind drag you into unnecessary suffering. Meditation interrupts that cycle. It trains your brain to slow down, to pause before it spirals, to detach from impulses that once dictated your behavior. Over time, you begin to think with clarity instead of panic, respond with intention instead of instinct, and process emotions without drowning in them. The world doesn't get quieter, you do. People notice this shift long before you do. They feel the steadiness in your presence, the grounded energy of someone who doesn't get pulled into emotional turbulence. The way your calm seems to absorb chaos instead of amplifying it. Meditation builds an inner fortress, a private sanctuary where your mind can reset, reorganize, and regain its strength. And once you build that space within yourself, no one can take it from you. Be a thinker, not a reactor. Being a thinker instead of a reactor is the shift from living on emotional autopilot to commanding your mind with intentional presence. Most people move through life responding to whatever stimulus hits them: anger, opinions, pressure, fear, never realizing that every impulsive reaction gives their power away. But when you choose to think first, a different kind of strength begins forming within you. You create a moment of space between what happens and what you do next, a moment where clarity has room to breathe. In that space, your mind becomes sharper than your emotions, and your judgment becomes stronger than your impulses. This practice is deeply psychological. Reactors are controlled by the world. Thinkers control how the world affects them. Reactors panic, overexplain, defend, or lash out. Thinkers absorb, analyze, and respond with precision. The difference is not intelligence, it's self-mastery. When you stop treating every situation like a threat to your ego, you start seeing reality as it is, rather than through the distortion of fear or pride. Emotionally, this transformation hits hard. You begin noticing how often people speak without thinking, argue without understanding, and act without awareness. You watch chaos unfold around you while remaining grounded, steady, almost untouchable. People feel that difference. Your calmness unsettles them. Your silence makes them question themselves. Your presence feels heavier because it carries intention instead of noise. Being a thinker means your mind becomes your shield, your strategy, and your power. You stop being dragged by life and start directing it. And once you taste the strength of responding with thought instead of reaction, you realize how rare and unstoppable that kind of clarity truly is. Stay skeptical, not cynical. Staying skeptical without becoming cynical is the delicate balance between protecting your mind and keeping it open. Skepticism is strength. It is the refusal to accept ideas blindly, the instinct to question, to verify, to dig beneath the surface instead of swallowing whatever the world feeds you. But cynicism is something different. Cynicism is the collapse that happens when skepticism loses its hope. It is the belief that everything is corrupt, everyone has an agenda, and nothing is worth trusting. Skepticism sharpens you, cynicism hardens you. One builds intelligence, the other builds walls. When you choose skepticism, you give yourself permission to think rather than react. You analyze motivations, examine evidence, and challenge assumptions, including your own. You stay alert without becoming bitter. You remain curious without becoming naive. This mindset protects you from manipulation because you aren't easily swayed by charm, authority, or emotional pressure. You see through illusions, but you also remain open enough to recognize truth when it appears. The emotional strength in this lies in refusing to let disappointment turn you cold. Skepticism allows you to engage with the world while maintaining your boundaries. Cynicism convinces you the world isn't worth engaging with at all. Skeptics evolve. Cynics stagnate. Skeptics learn. Cynics withdraw. Choosing skepticism means choosing to stay mentally alive. You remain sharp, deliberate, and discerning, able to navigate complexity without letting it poison you. People sense this balance as soon as they speak with you. You aren't gullible, but you aren't bitter either. You are the rare kind of person who sees clearly without losing heart, and that clarity gives you a quiet power that unsettles both manipulators and cynics alike. Think in probabilities. Thinking in probabilities is the mental shift that pulls you out of the rigid, fragile world of certainty and places you into a mindset where reality becomes clearer, sharper, and far more honest. Most people crave absolute answers because certainty feels safe, but that safety is an illusion that blinds them to nuance and traps them in black and white thinking. When you begin seeing life in terms of likelihoods instead of guarantees, you stop being shocked by outcomes, stop being paralyzed by the unexpected, and stop making decisions based on emotional extremes. You start operating with a quieter, more calculated mind, one that anticipates possibilities instead of clinging to assumptions. This perspective softens your ego. It forces you to admit that you don't know everything, that the future isn't fixed, and that your judgment is only as strong as the data you are willing to update. Instead of saying, "This will happen," you start saying, "This might happen," and that simple shift frees you. It allows you to adapt faster, react smarter, and adjust your beliefs without feeling like you failed. People who think in probabilities don't crumble when they're wrong because they never pretended their predictions were absolute. They evolve. This way of thinking becomes a kind of emotional armor. It protects you from disappointment, from impulsive decisions, from the mental rigidity that causes others to break under pressure. People feel this steadiness in you. They sense the calm of someone who moves through life with awareness instead of illusion, someone who expects uncertainty and navigates it with precision rather than fear. Thinking in probabilities turns your mind into a flexible, adaptive force, one that stays sharp no matter how unpredictable the world becomes. Write daily writing. Daily is the act of turning the chaos in your mind into something you can finally understand. Most people move through life carrying unspoken emotions, half-formed ideas, unresolved conflicts, and silent fears that pile up until they distort how they think and react. But when you write every day, you give all of that a place to go. You take what's swirling inside you and pin it to the page where it can no longer hide behind distractions or excuses. Writing forces clarity. It exposes what you truly feel, what you actually believe, and what you've been pretending not to see. The moment ink meets paper, your thoughts stop being vague shadows and become something you can confront, shape, or release. Writing daily sharpens your mind because it demands that you articulate your internal world with precision. You begin to notice patterns in your thinking, cycles in your emotions, and truths you overlook when everything stays trapped inside your head. Over time, the discipline becomes transformative. Your self-awareness deepens, your communication sharpens, your creativity wakes up. You start thinking in complete thoughts instead of mental fragments, and people feel the difference in the way you speak, plan, and respond. Daily writing also becomes a form of emotional resilience. It gives you a private space to unload what burdens you before it turns into something heavier. It becomes a sanctuary where you can bleed without breaking, process without performing, and as you write day after day, you begin crafting a mind that is cleaner, calmer, and more powerful because you're no longer carrying everything alone. Analyze your own behavior. Analyzing your own behavior is the courageous act of turning your attention inward and confronting the truths most people spend their entire lives avoiding. It is the moment you stop blaming circumstances, luck, or other people and start examining the patterns you repeat without realizing it, the habits that sabotage you, the reactions that expose you, the insecurities that quietly guide your decisions. When you study your own behavior, you begin seeing yourself with the kind of clarity that can feel uncomfortable, even painful, because it reveals the parts of you that still need growth, discipline, and healing. This practice is emotional because it strips away the illusions you've built to protect your ego. You notice how often you act out of fear instead of intention, how easily you slip into excuses, how quickly you retreat from discomfort. But this awareness is powerful. It is the birthplace of transformation. Once you see your patterns, you can change them. Once you recognize your triggers, you can disarm them. Once you understand your weaknesses, you can turn them into strengths. Analyzing your behavior also sharpens your intelligence. You start connecting cause and effect within your own life. Why certain relationships fail, why certain goals never stick, why you repeat the same emotional loops. This self-study makes you more stable, more strategic, more self-aware than the average person who drifts through life blindly. People sense the difference too. They feel the depth in someone who knows themselves, the steadiness of someone who has confronted their own contradictions. Analyzing your behavior creates a mind that doesn't run from its own truth, one strong enough to evolve rather than stay trapped in old versions of itself. Control emotional reactions. Controlling your emotional reactions is the moment you stop being ruled by whatever your feelings decide to do with you. Most people live in a state of emotional reflex. Someone says the wrong thing and they explode. A situation feels unfair and they shut down. Fear appears and they run. Their emotions puppet them, pulling strings they don't even realize exist. But when you learn to control your emotional reactions, you break those strings one by one. You create a gap between what you feel and what you do, and that gap is where your power lives. This control doesn't mean suppressing emotions or pretending they don't hurt. It means observing them without letting them hijack your behavior. Your anger can flare, but you don't lash out. Your fear can whisper, but you don't collapse. Your sadness can rise, but you don't drown. In that restraint, you discover a deeper intensity, a self-mastery most people never taste because they fold the moment their feelings become uncomfortable. Emotionally controlled people unsettle others. They can't be provoked, manipulated, or guilted into reactions. Their calmness in conflict feels almost unnatural to those who rely on chaos to win. And in everyday life, this stability becomes magnetic. People trust you more because your reactions are not unpredictable storms. They are chosen responses. Over time, you begin to feel something shift inside you. You stop taking everything personally. You stop fighting battles that don't matter. You stop letting temporary emotions create permanent consequences. Instead of being a victim of your feelings, you become their commander. And once you reach that point, your presence gains a depth, a quiet, unshakable strength that others can feel long before they understand it. Breathe calmly under stress. Breathing calmly under stress is the ability to reclaim control in moments when your mind is trying to spiral out of your grasp. Most people let panic hijack their nervous system. Their breath shortens, their heart races, their thoughts scatter, and suddenly they are no longer responding to the situation, but reacting to the chaos inside their own body. But when you choose to breathe slowly, deeply, and deliberately, you interrupt that spiral. You send a signal to your brain that the threat is not as large as it feels, that you are still in command, that your emotions do not dictate your actions. This single act can shift you from overwhelmed to composed in seconds. Calm breathing rewires the body's response to pressure. It slows the heartbeat, steadies the thoughts, and clears the mental fog that stress creates. In that clarity, options appear that panic would have hidden from you. You start thinking in a way that is measured instead of frantic, strategic instead of impulsive. People notice this difference. They see the way you stay anchored while others unravel, the way your presence becomes a stabilizing force instead of another source of tension. It makes you look unshakable, even when you're navigating internal storms. Over time, breathing calmly becomes more than a technique. It becomes a psychological anchor. Your body learns that stress does not own you, that fear does not control you, that no situation can rip you away from yourself as long as you can regulate your breath. And once your breath is yours again, so is your mind. Walk without your phone. Walking without your phone is the simple yet radical act of reclaiming your mind from constant stimulation. Most people move through the world tethered to devices that flood their brains with noise, notifications, and manufactured urgency. But when you step outside without that digital leash, you enter a rare kind of silence, a silence that forces your mind to breathe again. Without the distraction, your senses wake up. You notice the rhythm of your footsteps, the texture of the air, the way your thoughts shift when nothing interrupts them. This isn't just a walk, it's a return to yourself. As you walk, your mind begins to sort itself out. Ideas rise that were buried under screens. Emotions surface that you've been too busy to feel. Solutions to problems you've been overthinking suddenly appear with surprising clarity. In the absence of constant input, your brain finally has the space to process, to reflect, to connect dots you didn't even realize were scattered. This is where intuition becomes louder, where creativity stretches, where anxiety loosens its grip because there is nothing feeding it. Walking without your phone builds a mental stillness that people instantly sense. You stop reacting like someone who's always plugged into noise and start responding like someone who has learned how to think without external permission. The world becomes sharper, your inner dialogue becomes clearer, and the simple act of putting your phone away becomes a quiet rebellion against the chaos everyone else is drowning in. This ritual strengthens your presence, deepens your awareness, and reminds you that your mind performs best when it's not constantly being pulled away from itself. Reframe negatives. Reframing negatives is the deliberate choice to take the very experiences meant to break you and turn them into fuel that strengthens your mind instead. Most people let setbacks define them. They crumble under rejection, spiral after failure, and interpret every difficulty as proof that life is unfair or that they're not enough. But when you reframe a negative, you refuse to let the story stop at the pain. You take the same event, the same emotion, the same bruise to your ego, and you twist it into something that works for you instead of against you. This shift isn't delusion, it's psychological alchemy. It's the moment your mind realizes it has the power to control the meaning of what happens, even when it can't control the event itself. Emotionally, reframing is transformative because it forces you to sit with your hurt long enough to understand it, rather than suffocate under it. You start seeing the lesson inside the wound, the strength inside the struggle, the pattern inside the chaos. You begin recognizing that adversity often exposes your deepest potential, not your deepest flaw. And as you do this more often, your mind becomes shockingly resilient. Things that once shattered you now sharpen you. Situations that used to overwhelm you now reveal your adaptability. People notice this shift too. They see how calmly you handle what others panic over, how you maintain clarity in situations that make most people spiral. They sense that you're not easily shaken, not easily discouraged, and not easily manipulated by fear. Reframing negatives turns your mind into something powerful, a place where hardship loses its ability to control you. Improve your information diet. Improving your information diet is the conscious decision to stop feeding your mind the mental equivalent of junk food. Most people consume whatever appears in front of them: news designed to terrify, gossip designed to distract, entertainment designed to numb. They scroll endlessly, unknowingly allowing their thoughts, fears, and beliefs to be shaped by the loudest voices rather than the wisest ones. But when you begin choosing what you expose your mind to, something profound shifts. You stop being a passive receiver of noise and become the curator of your own reality. This choice is emotional because it forces you to confront how much of your worldview was never truly yours. You start noticing how anxiety rises after certain content, how cynicism grows after certain people, how confusion multiplies after certain media. It feels like waking up from a long mental sleep, and the awakening can be uncomfortable because it reveals just how much your environment has been thinking for you. But in that discomfort lies the beginning of control. As you refine your information intake, books over gossip, knowledge over outrage, depth over sensationalism, you feel your mind clearing. Your thoughts become sharper, your focus steadier, your beliefs more grounded. You stop reacting to everything and start choosing what deserves your attention. People notice the difference too. While others are mentally cluttered and easily swayed, you become centered, informed, and difficult to manipulate. A strong information diet doesn't just change what you consume, it changes who you become. It builds a mind that is harder to infect with fear, harder to distract with noise, and harder to control through chaos. Your inner world becomes healthier, clearer, and far more powerful than it ever was before. Learn logic. Learning logic is the process of stripping your mind of comforting illusions and forcing it to confront reality as it actually is, not as you wish it to be. Most people navigate life through emotion, assumptions, and knee-jerk reactions, never realizing how easily their thinking can be manipulated by fear, desire, or bias. But when you study logic, truly study it, you begin noticing the invisible structures behind arguments, decisions, and beliefs. You start seeing how ideas connect, where reasoning collapses, and how quickly emotion can masquerade as truth. This awareness changes the way you move through the world. It gives your mind a sharpness that cuts through confusion with unsettling precision. Logic teaches you to question the premises behind every claim, including your own. It forces you to examine why you believe what you believe and whether those beliefs can stand without emotional scaffolding. This is uncomfortable, even destabilizing, because it exposes the mental shortcuts and flawed patterns that most people cling to without knowing it. But once you endure that discomfort, your thinking becomes cleaner, stronger, harder to deceive. You stop falling for manipulative arguments, dramatic narratives, or the seductive pull of easy answers. People feel the difference in you. They sense the calm structure behind your words, the way you don't get lost in emotional noise, the way you dissect problems with a clarity they can't replicate. Learning logic doesn't make you cold. It makes you dangerous to confusion, resistant to manipulation, and capable of navigating complexity with a mind that no longer folds under pressure or illusion. Study psychology. Studying psychology is the decision to stop moving blindly through life and start understanding the machinery behind every thought, emotion, and behavior, yours and everyone else's. Most people stumble through relationships, conflicts, and decisions without ever realizing the invisible forces shaping them. But when you dive into psychology, you begin uncovering the hidden scripts running in the background of human nature. You start seeing why people react the way they do, why they fear what they fear, why they cling, avoid, sabotage, love, manipulate, or break. The world stops being confusing and starts being readable. The more you study psychology, the more you begin recognizing your own patterns, the coping mechanisms you picked up as a child, the beliefs you inherited without question, the triggers that hijack your emotions, the biases that distort your perception. And with that awareness comes power. You can interrupt destructive cycles before they repeat, navigate conversations with precision, and understand the intention beneath people's behavior instead of getting lost in their words. Human nature stops surprising you, it starts revealing itself. Psychology also sharpens your intuition. You begin noticing micro-expressions, tone shifts, inconsistencies, desires people try to hide, and fears they unconsciously expose. You see the unspoken dynamics in every room, the emotional undercurrents in every interaction, the motives people don't even understand in themselves. It becomes impossible to be manipulated the same way, hurt the same way, or blindsided the same way. Studying psychology doesn't just make you smarter, it makes you dangerous in the quietest way. You move through the world with an understanding that most people never develop, and that awareness becomes a form of mental armor that strengthens every part of your life. Sleep enough. Sleeping enough is one of the most underestimated forms of self-discipline because it forces you to respect your mind in a world that glorifies burning yourself out. Most people treat sleep like an optional luxury, sacrificing hours of rest to chase productivity, validation, or distraction, never realizing that every night they cut short is a quiet sabotage of their own intelligence. When you choose to sleep enough, you're not being lazy. You're giving your brain the fuel it needs to perform at its highest level. During sleep, your mind repairs itself, processes emotions, strengthens memories, and organizes the chaos of your day into clarity. Without it, your thoughts become foggy, your reactions become impulsive, and your ability to think deeply collapses. But sleep is emotional too. It exposes how much you value yourself. When you prioritize rest, you're telling your mind and body you matter. Your well-being matters. Your clarity matters. That message reshapes everything. Your mood, your discipline, your resilience. You wake up steadier, sharper, calmer. You start thinking in straight lines instead of tangled spirals. Your decisions become more intentional because they're no longer driven by exhaustion. People feel this difference in you. They notice the groundedness in your energy, the sharpness in your attention, the strength in your presence. You become harder to manipulate, harder to provoke, harder to overwhelm, because a rested mind cannot be easily destabilized. Sleeping enough is not softness. It is strategy. It is the quiet, powerful choice to protect the mental fortress you're building, turning rest into a weapon that strengthens everything you do. Eat for your brain. Eating for your brain is the realization that every bite you take is either sharpening your mind or slowly dulling it. Most people eat for convenience, for cravings, for comfort, but rarely for clarity. They don't notice how certain foods drain their energy, fog their thinking, or sabotage their mood until it becomes their normal state. But when you begin choosing food deliberately, when you start fueling your brain instead of merely filling your stomach, everything changes. Your thoughts grow cleaner, your emotions more stable, your focus more intense. It feels like someone has turned the lights on inside your head. This shift is deeply emotional because it exposes how much your mental state has been shaped by physical neglect. You start realizing that the irritability, the anxiety spikes, the lack of motivation, so much of it was biochemical, not personal failure. Suddenly, the connection becomes undeniable. What you eat becomes how you think, and that awareness hits hard. It forces you to confront the quiet self-sabotage you've been committing daily without even noticing. As you begin feeding your brain what it truly needs, healthy fats, clean proteins, real nutrients, you feel your mental power rising. Focus lasts longer. Ideas come faster. Stress hits softer. Your mind becomes a place you actually want to live in. People sense something different too. Your energy feels more grounded, your presence sharper, your decisions clearer. Eating for your brain is not about dieting. It is about respecting the machine that runs your life. Once you experience the mental strength that comes from proper nourishment, going back to your old habits begins to feel like willingly surrendering your clarity, and you stop doing it. Training your body is the decision to forge strength through effort, discipline, and discomfort, and that physical transformation inevitably reshapes your mind. Most people separate the body from the mind, pretending they can think sharply while living in a vessel that is exhausted, neglected, and weakened by inactivity. But the truth is brutal. A weak body creates a weak mind. When you train, when you push your muscles to burn, when you force yourself through that final rep your brain swore you couldn't handle, you begin teaching yourself a lesson no book can give you, that you are capable of far more than your comfort wants you to believe. Physical training rewires your relationship with struggle. Every drop of sweat, every moment your lungs burn, every second you fight the urge to quit becomes a direct confrontation with your own limitations. You learn discipline not by talking about it, but by feeling it in your bones. You carry that discipline into your thoughts, your decisions, your reactions. Stress feels smaller. Difficult tasks feel manageable. Your mind becomes steadier because your body has been trained to endure. People notice this change instantly. They sense the energy in your posture, the grounded confidence in the way you move, the quiet intensity of someone who has learned to conquer themselves physically. Training your body gives you a kind of presence that can't be faked, a strength that radiates even before you speak. And as your body grows stronger, your mind follows, becoming sharper, calmer, more controlled. You begin to trust yourself in a way that only comes from doing hard physical work, and that trust becomes a force that shapes every part of your life. Learn something technical. Learning something technical is the commitment to sharpening your mind in a way that forces precision, logic, and disciplined thinking. While most people float through life relying on emotions and assumptions, technical skills demand that you confront reality exactly as it is, not as you wish it to be. Whether it's coding, engineering, data analysis, or any field rooted in structure and problem solving, the process forces your brain to operate on a higher level. You begin learning how systems work, how patterns form, how cause and effect interact beneath the surface of everyday life. Technical knowledge doesn't just teach you information, it rewires the way you process the world. At first, it feels frustrating, almost humiliating, because technical learning exposes the limits of your current intelligence. It makes you slow down, struggle, reread, rethink, and push through moments where nothing makes sense. But that struggle is the exact point. With every small breakthrough, your mind becomes sharper, more resilient, more capable of dissecting complexity. You stop being intimidated by the unknown because you've trained yourself to break big problems into smaller pieces until they reveal their logic. Something shifts inside you when you learn a technical skill. Your confidence becomes grounded, not loud. Your thinking becomes structured, not scattered. You start noticing patterns in life the same way you notice patterns in code or equations. Everything becomes more understandable, less chaotic. And people feel this. They sense the depth behind your reasoning, the clarity in your explanations, the quiet competence that comes from having challenged your mind far beyond comfort. Learning something technical doesn't just make you skilled, it makes you formidable. Learn something creative. Learning something creative is the moment you give your mind permission to expand beyond logic and into imagination, where ideas aren't confined by rules, but shaped by emotion, curiosity, and instinct. Most people avoid creative pursuits because they fear looking inexperienced or foolish, forgetting that creativity is not about perfection, it's about expression. When you learn something creative, whether it's drawing, music, writing, design, or any art form that pulls you out of your comfort zone, you awaken a part of your mind that has been silent for years. This part thinks differently, sees differently, feels differently. It connects patterns that logic alone could never uncover. Emotionally, creativity breaks you open in a way that analytical learning cannot. It forces you to confront your self-judgment, your fear of failure, your need for control. At first, it's uncomfortable. Your work looks imperfect. Your attempts feel awkward. But that is where the real transformation happens. You learn to create without needing permission, to explore without needing validation, to express without needing applause. And slowly, your mind becomes more flexible, more adaptable, more open. You start seeing beauty in places others overlook and meaning in details others ignore. This shift becomes visible. People notice how your thinking becomes more original, how your ideas carry a spark they can't imitate, how you offer perspectives that seem to come out of nowhere. Creativity sharpens intuition, deepens emotion, and expands intelligence in directions most will never explore. Learning something creative makes your mind multidimensional, and that multidimensionality becomes a quiet power that sets you apart in ways you never expect. Embrace discomfort. Embracing discomfort is the deliberate act of stepping into the very spaces your mind tries to protect you from. Most people spend their lives running toward ease, believing comfort equals safety, but comfort is the silent killer of growth. Discomfort, on the other hand, is the furnace where stronger versions of you are forged. When you willingly walk into what feels unfamiliar, uncertain, or demanding, you send a powerful message to your own brain. I am not afraid of what challenges me. That message rewires you. It shifts your relationship with fear, turning it from an obstacle into a compass pointing toward transformation. The emotional impact of this practice is intense. Discomfort exposes your insecurities, your weaknesses, the limits you pretend not to have. It forces you to confront the truth about who you are right now and who you could be if you stopped avoiding what scares you. That confrontation stings, but inside the sting is clarity. Inside the struggle is strength. You start realizing that every moment of discomfort you endure expands your capacity to handle life. Your threshold for stress rises, your resilience thickens, your confidence deepens in a way that comfort could never produce. As you make discomfort a habit, you begin to change in ways people can feel. Challenges that crush others barely shake you. Situations that make most people crumble simply become opportunities for you to adapt. You carry yourself with a quiet intensity, the kind that comes from surviving what others run from. Embracing discomfort doesn't make life easier, it makes you stronger. And once you experience that strength, avoiding discomfort starts to feel like abandoning your own potential. Break patterns regularly. Breaking patterns regularly is the act of refusing to let your life become a predictable loop that slowly dulls your mind without you noticing. Most people move through their days repeating the same routines, the same thoughts, the same emotional reactions until they become prisoners of their own habits. Familiarity feels safe, but it also numbs you. It tricks you into believing you're living when you're really just repeating. But when you intentionally break your patterns, even in small ways, you jolt your brain awake. You force it to re-engage with the present moment instead of drifting through autopilot. You remind yourself that you are still capable of change. Pattern breaking disrupts mental stagnation. It challenges the neural pathways that have grown comfortable and lazy. It pushes you to adapt, to think, to respond differently than you usually do. This discomfort is powerful because it exposes how much of your identity is just routine pretending to be personality. When you do things you normally avoid or approach situations from angles you never consider, you expand your mental flexibility, the quiet superpower that allows you to evolve instead of decay. People sense this adaptability in you. They see how you can handle the unexpected, how you stay calm when plans shift, how your mind doesn't freeze when life throws you something unfamiliar. Most people crumble when faced with change because they've spent years avoiding it. You, however, start to crave these disruptions. Breaking patterns becomes more than a habit. It becomes a reminder that you are still alive, still growing, still capable of becoming someone new at any moment without waiting for life to push you first. Stop complaining. Stopping the habit of complaining is the moment you reclaim your power from everything you once blamed. Most people complain because it gives them a temporary sense of relief, a way to release frustration without taking responsibility. But every complaint silently teaches the mind one dangerous lesson: I am powerless. When you stop complaining, you break that spell. You force your brain to confront reality directly instead of escaping into excuses. The absence of complaining exposes your true thoughts, your true patterns, your true capabilities, without the noise of self-pity to soften the truth. At first, the silence feels harsh. You feel the weight of your own accountability pressing against you. You notice how often you wanted to complain just to avoid effort, growth, or change. But with each moment you resist, something inside you strengthens. Your focus shifts from problems to solutions. Your tolerance for negativity drops. Your emotional discipline rises. You begin conserving mental energy instead of bleeding it out through constant dissatisfaction. People around you start noticing the shift too. You stop being the person who drains energy from a room and become the one who stabilizes it. Your presence feels stronger, steadier, more grounded. Complaining makes you predictable. Refusing to complain makes you powerful. It signals that you no longer need sympathy to survive, no longer need validation to keep moving, no longer need the world to adjust for you to feel whole. When you stop complaining, you stop surrendering. You start building. You start adapting. You start rising in ways that make people wonder when you became so unshakable. Quit gossip. Quitting gossip is the decision to protect your mind from the poison most people willingly swallow. Gossip feels harmless, even entertaining, but underneath the surface, it is one of the fastest ways to weaken your character and scatter your mental strength. When you gossip, you train your mind to focus on other people's flaws instead of your own growth. You feed your ego with comparison, jealousy, and drama, and your brain becomes addicted to cheap emotional highs that leave you emptier each time. But when you stop participating, something powerful happens. You reclaim your energy, your privacy, and your integrity. You stop wasting mental bandwidth on lives that don't belong to you and start redirecting that attention back into your own evolution. Emotionally, quitting gossip forces you to confront uncomfortable truths. It reveals how often you use other people's mistakes to distract yourself from your own. It exposes the insecurity behind every whispered judgment, the envy behind every rumor, the loneliness behind every conversation built on tearing someone down. Walking away from that noise makes you face your own reflection, and while that might sting at first, it's exactly what strengthens you. As you detach from gossip, your presence begins to change. People sense the difference immediately. You become someone who can be trusted, someone who doesn't need drama to feel alive, someone whose conversations hold weight instead of emptiness. Your silence becomes a boundary, your integrity becomes a filter, and your mind becomes clearer, sharper, and calmer because it's no longer cluttered with everyone else's chaos. Quitting gossip builds a level of inner strength that makes you stand out in a world addicted to tearing itself apart. Use active recall. Using active recall is the shift from passively absorbing information to actively pulling it out of your mind, forcing your brain to work instead of letting it coast. Most people read, highlight, rewatch, or restudy, thinking repetition equals learning, but all they're doing is comforting themselves with familiarity. Active recall is different. It is uncomfortable, even frustrating, because it exposes what you don't know. It makes your brain strain, reach, and struggle, and that struggle is exactly what strengthens memory. When you try to remember information without looking at it, you're sending a signal to your mind that this knowledge matters enough to be retrieved, not just recognized. This process is emotionally charged because it reveals your gaps in a way passive studying never will. It forces you to face the insecurity of realizing you understand less than you believed. But that exposure is power. It replaces illusion with accuracy. It gives you a real measure of your knowledge, and more importantly, it gives your brain the friction it needs to actually grow. Every moment you wrestle with forgotten details, every second you push yourself to recall instead of reread, your mind becomes sharper, stronger, more resilient. Over time, active recall transforms you into someone who retains what others forget. Your thinking becomes quick, your memory reliable, your learning accelerated. People notice it too, the way you remember conversations, concepts, names, ideas. It feels almost unnatural to them, but it's not magic. It's the result of repeatedly choosing the harder method, the one that burns knowledge into your mind instead of letting it slip through. Active recall builds a brain that doesn't just take in information, it keeps it. Teach what you learn. Teaching what you learn is the act of transforming knowledge from something you simply understand into something you truly command. Most people absorb information passively. They read, they watch, they listen, but they never test whether that knowledge can survive outside their own mind. When you teach, even to one person, even in the simplest way, you force your brain to reorganize what you've learned into clarity, structure, and meaning. Teaching exposes gaps you didn't know you had, strengths you didn't realize you'd built, and insights that would have stayed buried if you kept everything to yourself. The moment you explain something out loud, you engage a deeper layer of cognition. Your thoughts sharpen, your memory strengthens, and the concept becomes part of you instead of something floating on the surface of your awareness. Teaching turns information into identity. It makes your understanding sturdy, tested, and alive. And there is a psychological shift that happens when you speak knowledge with confidence. Your mind rises to match your words. People feel the difference too. They notice the clarity in your explanations, the depth behind your insights, the way your understanding doesn't crumble under pressure. Teaching makes you magnetic, not because you pretend to be an expert, but because you're willing to share what you're actively mastering. It builds authority, not through ego, but through demonstrated comprehension. Over time, teaching what you learn becomes a cycle of evolution. You learn, you teach, you solidify, you grow, and each time you share knowledge, your mind becomes sharper, more confident, and far harder to forget. Seek mentors. Seeking mentors is the decision to accelerate your growth by learning from those who have already walked the path you're trying to conquer. Most people move through life repeating the same mistakes simply because they're too proud, too insecure, or too unaware to ask for guidance. But when you seek mentors intentionally, you tap into a source of wisdom that didn't cost you pain to earn. A mentor's experience becomes a shortcut through the confusion, doubt, and trial and error that slows everyone else down. Their insight sharpens you. Their standards elevate you. Their belief in you exposes the limitations you've placed on yourself. Mentors see what you can't. They catch your blind spots, challenge your excuses, and push you far beyond the comfort zones you've convinced yourself are boundaries. They hold you accountable in a way that feels uncomfortable but transformative. Their presence strips away your illusions and forces you to rise to the level of the future you claim to want. The right mentor becomes a mirror that reflects both your potential and your flaws with brutal clarity. There's a quiet power in learning from someone who has earned their knowledge through experience instead of theory. Their stories, failures, and victories inject perspective into your decisions. You begin making moves with more confidence, more precision, more depth. People start noticing that your judgment feels sharper, your direction clearer, your growth faster. Seeking mentors is not a sign of weakness. It's a declaration that you refuse to stagnate. It means you're willing to learn, willing to evolve, willing to be guided into a version of yourself that you might not reach alone. And that humility, combined with ambition, becomes a force that separates you from everyone still trying to figure everything out by themselves. Study smarter people. Studying smarter people is the decision to humble yourself before those who think on levels you haven't reached yet. It is the quiet acknowledgement that growth requires exposure to minds sharper, faster, deeper, and more disciplined than your own. Most people avoid this because it bruises their ego. They feel small, intimidated, even threatened in the presence of brilliance. But when you choose to learn from smarter people instead of competing with them, you unlock a kind of accelerated evolution that changes everything about how you think. Their insights stretch your understanding, their perspectives challenge your assumptions, and their habits reveal the standards you never realized you lacked. Emotionally, this process is intense. It forces you to confront your intellectual insecurities, the gaps in your knowledge, the ways you've been coasting on comfort instead of effort. You feel the sting of realizing how much more there is to learn, but that sting becomes fuel. It wakes you up. It pulls you out of mediocrity. It makes you hungry. Over time, your mind begins absorbing their patterns, how they reason, how they question, how they solve, how they adapt. Their level of thinking becomes a mirror that reflects the potential buried inside you. People notice the transformation. They see how your ideas sharpen, how your conversations deepen, how your confidence becomes grounded instead of performative. You start carrying the quiet intensity of someone who has been shaped by giants. Studying smarter people doesn't make you feel inferior. It makes you unstoppable because you're learning from the very minds most people are too insecure to stand beside. Cut time wasters. Cutting time wasters is the moment you realize your life isn't stolen in giant tragedies, but in small, constant distractions that drain you without your permission. Most people don't notice how much of their potential disappears into meaningless habits, endless scrolling, shallow conversations, pointless routines, commitments made out of guilt instead of purpose. These tiny leaks erode your focus, your energy, your ambition, until one day you wake up wondering why you feel stuck when you've been busy the whole time. Cutting time wasters is not about being rigid. It is about reclaiming the pieces of your life you've been giving away without thinking. The emotional weight of this shift hits hard because it forces you to confront how much of your stagnation was self-inflicted. You start noticing the patterns that have quietly kept you small, the people who leave you drained instead of energized, the habits that comfort you while stealing hours you can never get back. This awareness is uncomfortable. It exposes how long you've been negotiating with your own potential. But awareness also brings power. When you begin eliminating these drains, even slowly, something inside you wakes up. Your days feel longer. Your mind feels clearer. Your goals feel closer. You begin to realize how much brilliance was buried beneath distractions you thought were harmless. And as your focus sharpens, people start feeling the shift in you. You become harder to access, harder to sway, harder to pull into nonsense. Cutting time wasters doesn't make you cold. It makes you intentional. It turns your time into something valuable, something protected. And once you feel the strength that comes from living without constant drains, wasting your time starts to feel like wasting your life, and you simply stop allowing it. Create more than you consume. Creating more than you consume is the decision to stop living as a passive observer and start shaping reality with your own hands, thoughts, and imagination. Most people drift through life absorbing endless streams of content, scrolling, watching, listening, filling their minds with other people's ideas while never producing anything of their own. Consumption feels easy, comforting, effortless, but it slowly erodes your identity. It turns your mind into a storage unit instead of a source. But when you choose to create, when you write, build, design, think, or express, you flip the balance. You become a generator of ideas instead of a collector of them. Creating forces your mind to stretch. It demands clarity, courage, originality. It reveals your insecurities and pushes you through them. Every time you make something, you confront the fear of judgment, the discomfort of imperfection, the vulnerability of effort, and you rise above it. This process hardens your character in a way consumption never will. You begin to trust your own voice more than the world's noise. You feel your mind coming alive, connecting dots, shaping meaning, producing something only you could bring into existence. People notice creators. They feel the intention behind your actions, the spark in your presence, the weight in your ideas. You become someone who contributes instead of absorbs, someone who influences instead of imitates. Creating more than you consume doesn't just build skill, it builds identity. It makes your mind sharper, your confidence stronger, and your life fuller. Over time, you realize that creation is not about talent. It's about choosing to leave a mark instead of merely watching others leave theirs. Embrace boredom. Embracing boredom is the decision to stop running from the stillness that most people are terrified to face. In a world engineered to distract you at every second, boredom feels like a threat, an empty space your mind instantly tries to fill with noise, scrolling, stimulation, anything that keeps you from being alone with yourself. But when you allow boredom to exist without fleeing from it, something powerful happens. Your brain wakes up. The mental fog created by constant stimulation begins to lift, and your deeper thoughts, the ones buried under notifications and cheap dopamine, rise to the surface. Boredom is not the absence of activity. It is the doorway to creativity, clarity, and self-awareness. When you stop numbing your mind with endless input, it begins generating its own ideas. You start thinking original thoughts instead of recycled ones. Problems you've been avoiding suddenly reveal their solutions. Your emotions become clearer. Your desires become sharper. Your intuition, once drowned out by noise, becomes an internal voice you can finally hear. Most people panic in boredom because it forces them to confront themselves. But when you embrace it, you develop a level of inner stability that others can't imitate. You stop needing constant stimulation to feel alive. You stop depending on distraction to avoid discomfort. You build a mind that can sit in silence without collapsing. People notice the difference. They feel the depth in your presence, the patience in your thinking, the calm that comes from someone who isn't mentally addicted to noise. Embracing boredom turns your mind into a space where real thinking happens, and that makes you far more powerful than those who never stop chasing the next distraction. Track your habits. Tracking your habits is the moment you stop guessing who you are and start confronting the truth of how you actually live. Most people rely on intentions, feelings, and vague promises to guide their growth, but intentions don't build anything. Patterns do. When you begin tracking your habits, you expose those patterns with brutal honesty. You see the days you showed up and the days you lied to yourself. You see the choices that strengthen you and the ones that quietly sabotage your potential. This clarity is uncomfortable at first, almost jarring, because it forces you to face the gap between the person you claim to be and the person your habits reveal. Emotionally, habit tracking is transformative. It removes the fog that excuses create and replaces it with undeniable evidence. You start noticing how tiny actions compound, how small failures repeat, how little victories build momentum. Suddenly, you're no longer living in the illusion of, I think I'm doing enough. You're staring directly at the proof of your discipline or your neglect. That awareness creates a pressure that feels heavy but empowering, because once you see your patterns, you can no longer hide from them. You begin adjusting your life with intention, reshaping your days instead of drifting through them. Over time, the process becomes addictive. Each checkmark becomes a quiet victory, each streak a symbol of your evolving identity. People feel the shift in you, the stability, the discipline, the growing sense of control. Tracking your habits builds a mind that no longer relies on motivation or luck. It relies on proof, consistency, and self-respect. And that kind of self-awareness becomes a power most people never develop. Solve problems yourself. First, solving problems yourself first is the decision to stop running to others the moment life becomes inconvenient and instead confront the situation with your own mind. Most people look for help out of habit, not necessity. They want reassurance, validation, or an escape from the discomfort of thinking deeply. But when you force yourself to face a problem alone before seeking guidance, you ignite a part of your brain that would otherwise stay dormant. You push yourself to analyze, to experiment, to take responsibility for your own outcomes. Even if you fail, the act of trying strengthens you. This practice is emotionally intense because it exposes how dependent you've become on outside answers. It reveals the fear you feel when you don't immediately know what to do, the self-doubt that whispers you're not capable. But working through that discomfort is where the transformation happens. You start realizing you can figure out far more than you believed. You begin solving issues faster, thinking clearer, acting with more certainty. Over time, people sense this shift. You become the person who remains calm when others panic, the one who thinks instead of begs for solutions, the one who doesn't crumble at the first sign of difficulty. Your independence becomes magnetic, not because you never ask for help, but because you don't collapse without it. Solving problems yourself first builds a mental toughness that can't be taught, only earned. It turns challenges into training, uncertainty into creativity, and obstacles into opportunities to sharpen your mind. And the more you rely on your own intelligence, the more powerful and trustworthy your mind becomes. Be okay. Being misunderstood, being okay with being misunderstood, is the moment you stop living for the approval, validation, and comfort of others and start living in alignment with your own truth. Most people twist themselves into versions that are easy to accept, easy to explain, easy to swallow. But every time you shrink to fit someone else's expectations, you abandon a piece of yourself. When you choose to allow misunderstanding, you reclaim that piece. You stop chasing clarity in the minds of people who were never willing to see you clearly in the first place. You stop explaining, defending, and diluting your intentions just to avoid discomfort. This acceptance creates a rare kind of strength. It frees your thoughts from the prison of public opinion and gives you permission to evolve without waiting for permission. You become more honest, more direct, more authentic, because you no longer fear that others may not get you. Their confusion becomes irrelevant. Your integrity becomes everything. This shift is unsettling to those who rely on external validation to feel secure. They see your independence as arrogance, your clarity as defiance, your growth as threat. But that reaction only reveals their fragility, not your fault. When you're no longer controlled by the fear of being misunderstood, your decisions become cleaner, your path becomes clearer, and your mind becomes quieter. You stop negotiating your identity with people who were never meant to define it, and in that freedom, you begin to operate with a level of internal power that feels untouchable, untamed, and undeniably your own, because nothing weakens a person more than living for approval, and nothing strengthens a person more than walking forward anyway. Build emotional intelligence. Building emotional intelligence is the decision to understand your inner world instead of being blindly ruled by it. Most people move through life reacting to their emotions without ever questioning where those feelings come from or what they're trying to say. But when you start building emotional intelligence, you begin treating your emotions as information rather than commands. You learn to pause before you explode, to listen before you defend, to understand before you judge. This shift reveals truths about yourself that are uncomfortable at first, insecurities you've hidden, patterns you've repeated, wounds you've avoided. But facing them gives you a level of control most people never develop. Emotional intelligence turns chaos into clarity. You start recognizing your triggers before they take over, seeing the difference between what you feel and what is real, separating temporary emotions from meaningful signals. You become someone who can stay grounded when others spiral, someone who can communicate without wounding, someone who can disagree without destroying. And as you learn to navigate your own emotional landscape, you also become far better at reading others. You notice the subtle tension in their voice, the fear behind their anger, the truth behind what they refuse to say. Human behavior stops confusing you because you understand the emotions that drive it. This kind of awareness is rare. It makes you harder to manipulate, harder to provoke, harder to destabilize. People sense the depth in your presence, your calm, your empathy, your ability to understand what they're feeling, even when they can't articulate it. Building emotional intelligence doesn't make you softer. It makes you stronger in a way that disarms everyone who still lets their emotions control them. Observe without judging. Observing without judging is the skill of seeing reality as it is, not as your emotions distort it to be. Most people rush to label everything good, bad, right, wrong, because judgment feels safe. It gives the illusion of control, the comfort of certainty, the ego's quick hit of superiority. But when you stop judging and start simply observing, something profound happens. Your mind becomes quieter, clearer, sharper. You begin noticing details that were drowned out by your assumptions. You begin understanding people instead of reacting to them. You begin seeing patterns that judgment would have blinded you to. Emotionally, this practice is uncomfortable at first. It forces you to sit with situations without immediately deciding how you feel about them. It exposes how much of your suffering comes not from reality, but from the stories you attach to it. Observing without judgment teaches you to detach, to breathe, to watch your own emotions rise and fall without letting them dictate your behavior. It is the moment you realize your thoughts are not commands. They are weather passing through the sky of your mind. As you master this, your presence changes. People feel the difference. You become harder to provoke, harder to manipulate, harder to throw off balance. Your calmness becomes unsettling in the best way, the kind of grounded awareness that makes others question their own reactivity. You begin understanding motives, recognizing truths, and navigating conflict with a clarity most people never reach. Observing without judging doesn't make you passive. It makes you powerful because you finally see what others are too blinded by emotion to notice. Say, I don't know. Saying I don't know is one of the most powerful admissions a person can make, not because it highlights ignorance, but because it exposes a level of honesty most people are too afraid to touch. The world trains you to pretend to understand, pretend to be certain, pretend you've got it all figured out. But pretending traps you. It locks you into false confidence, fragile opinions, and shallow understanding. The moment you say, I don't know, you shatter that illusion and create space for truth to enter. It is the doorway to real intelligence. The emotional impact of these three words is deeper than most realize. Saying them strips away ego. It forces you into vulnerability, into the uncomfortable space where growth actually happens. You confront the fear of looking unprepared or unimpressive, and in that confrontation, you discover how much strength there is in humility. You stop performing knowledge and start pursuing it. You stop clinging to bad assumptions and start replacing them with better ones. People notice when someone is brave enough to admit uncertainty. It makes you trustworthy because your confidence is no longer built on pretending. It makes you powerful because you refuse to anchor your identity to being right. And paradoxically, the more willing you are to say, I don't know, the faster your mind expands. This phrase becomes a tool, a reset button that frees you from defending ignorance and opens the path to learning. It turns conversations into opportunities, mistakes into lessons, and confusion into curiosity. Over time, your mind becomes sharper, lighter, and far more adaptable, simply because you chose honesty over ego. Stop overthinking. Stopping overthinking is not about silencing your mind. It's about refusing to let your thoughts turn into cages that trap you in fear, regret, and endless imagined scenarios. Most people mistake overthinking for intelligence, believing the constant spinning of possibilities means they're being thorough. But overthinking is rarely clarity. It is usually anxiety wearing the mask of logic. It drains your energy, distorts your perceptions, and convinces you that danger exists where it doesn't. When you choose to stop overthinking, you make the radical decision to interrupt the spiral, to step out of your mental fog before it swallows you. This shift begins with recognizing that your mind is trying to protect you, but doing so in a way that harms you. By grounding yourself in the present moment through action, movement, or simple awareness, you reclaim control from the whirlwind of what-ifs. You teach your brain that not every thought deserves attention, that not every scenario needs to be analyzed, that not every fear is a prophecy. With time, your mind learns to quiet itself because it no longer feeds on endless speculation. People notice this change. They feel the steadiness in you, the decisiveness, the calm certainty of someone who doesn't drown in possibilities but moves forward with intention. When you stop overthinking, you stop hesitating. Your choices become cleaner, your emotions become lighter, and your presence becomes stronger. The world becomes less threatening because you're no longer battling imaginary battles inside your head. And that freedom, simple, powerful, undeniable, is what turns your mind from a source of chaos into a source of strength. Set mental boundaries. Setting mental boundaries is the moment you decide that not every thought, emotion, or energy around you deserves space inside your mind. Most people live with their mental doors wide open, letting other people's opinions, expectations, and negativity walk in uninvited. But when you set mental boundaries, you reclaim authority over what you allow to influence you. You stop absorbing every problem as your responsibility, every insult as truth, every doubt as reality. This shift is subtle at first, but it becomes a form of inner protection that reshapes the way you move through the world. Mental boundaries mean you no longer let others define your worth or dictate your emotional state. You learn to recognize when someone's behavior is a reflection of their own unresolved issues rather than a reflection of you. You stop giving instant access to people who drain you, confuse you, or pull you into their chaos. Instead, you choose what gets to enter your mind with intention, ideas that strengthen you, emotions that teach you, challenges that help you grow. Everything else hits a wall before it reaches your peace. This discipline creates a kind of psychological quiet most people never experience. You stop reacting to every comment, stop internalizing every criticism, stop feeling responsible for fixing everyone around you. Your thoughts become cleaner, your emotions steadier, your decisions sharper, and people feel the shift. They sense that you are no longer easy to influence, no longer easy to guilt, no longer easy to pull into turmoil. Setting mental boundaries doesn't make you cold, it makes you sovereign. It turns your mind into a place where only what strengthens you is allowed to stay. Drop the need to be right. Dropping the need to be right is the moment you free your mind from the ego's tightest grip. Most people cling to being right as if their entire identity depends on it. They argue not to understand, but to win. They defend beliefs they've outgrown. They twist facts to protect their pride. But when you release that compulsive need to prove yourself, something inside you loosens. Your mind becomes flexible, open, and capable of absorbing truth without feeling threatened by it. Suddenly, you're no longer fighting reality, you're learning from it, and that shift changes everything. Emotionally, this is one of the hardest transformations. Letting go of being right forces you to confront the parts of you that fear being wrong, the insecurity that hides behind defensiveness, the fragile ego that confuses correction with humiliation. But once you push through that discomfort, you develop a strength most people never touch: humility with backbone. You stop seeing new information as an attack and start seeing it as an upgrade. You stop treating conversations like battles and start treating them like opportunities. People feel the difference in you. Your presence becomes calmer, your communication sharper, your thinking more honest. You no longer waste energy arguing with reality or trying to control how others perceive you. Instead, you listen, you adapt, you evolve, and that evolution becomes a form of power that quiets rooms without raising your voice. Dropping the need to be right doesn't make you weak. It makes you unstoppable, because a mind that isn't chained to its own ego can grow faster, think deeper, and rise higher than a mind that must always win. Practice humility. Practicing humility is the quiet decision to stop pretending you are above learning, above mistakes, above being wrong. Humility is not weakness. It is the emotional strength to see yourself clearly without collapsing under the truth. Most people use arrogance as armor, a way to hide insecurity behind loud confidence. But humility strips away that armor and forces you to stand as you are, imperfect, evolving, unfinished. And in that raw honesty, you gain something far more powerful than pride, self-awareness. Humility hurts at first. It challenges your ego, exposes your blind spots, and forces you to confront the parts of yourself you'd rather ignore. You start noticing how often you talk instead of listen, how quickly you defend instead of understand, how much energy you waste trying to appear knowledgeable instead of becoming knowledgeable. This realization is uncomfortable, almost humiliating, but that discomfort becomes your fuel. It drives you to improve without pretending, to learn without resistance, to grow without shame. People feel the difference when humility becomes part of who you are. You become easier to trust because you aren't performing. You become easier to respect because you don't need to dominate. You become easier to follow because you aren't blinded by your own ego. And yet, beneath that softness, there is a strength that unsettles others. The strength of someone who knows their flaws but is not controlled by them. Humility sharpens your intelligence because it keeps your mind open. It expands your emotional depth because it frees you from the fear of imperfection. And little by little, it turns you into the kind of person who grows endlessly, simply because you refuse to believe you've already arrived. Study great thinkers. Studying great thinkers is the act of reaching beyond the limits of your own mind and borrowing brilliance from those who shape the world with the force of their ideas. Most people surround themselves with the thoughts of their immediate environment, friends, media, opinions echoing in circles, never realizing how small their thinking becomes when it is fed only by proximity. But when you dive into the minds of history's greatest thinkers, you expose yourself to perspectives forged through struggle, genius, discipline, and an obsession with truth. You feel their intensity, their clarity, their intellectual courage, and it begins to infect you. Great thinkers do not just teach, they challenge. They force you to confront your assumptions, dismantle your comfortable beliefs, and rebuild your worldview on foundations stronger than emotion or tradition. Their words refuse to let you think lazily. They provoke you, stretch you, and sometimes offend you, but in that discomfort, your mind expands. This expansion is subtle at first, then unmistakable. You begin seeing connections where others see fragments, patterns where others see noise, meaning where others see randomness. People sense this shift. They notice the weight behind your thoughts, the calm depth in your reasoning, the sharpness in your questions. Studying great thinkers doesn't turn you into a copy of them. It turns you into someone capable of thinking on their level. Their brilliance becomes the fuel that shapes your own, and soon your mind carries the unmistakable imprint of someone who has walked with giants, learned from them, and now stands taller because of it. Know your biases. Knowing your biases is the act of shining a harsh, honest light on the invisible forces that shape your decisions, perceptions, and beliefs. Most people walk through life convinced they see the world clearly, never realizing their minds are tinted by assumptions they didn't choose, experiences they barely remember, and shortcuts their brain uses to avoid thinking too hard. But when you commit to knowing your biases, you begin dismantling the illusions that quietly control you. You start questioning why you believe what you believe, why certain people trigger you, why you trust some ideas instantly and reject others without thought. This self-interrogation is uncomfortable, even destabilizing, because it exposes the parts of your mind you've been mistaking for truth. The more you uncover your biases, the more power you gain over them. You start noticing when your emotions are clouding your judgment, when your past is distorting your perception, when your instincts are reacting to patterns that no longer apply. Instead of being a prisoner to mental shortcuts, you become someone who thinks from clarity rather than conditioning. This awareness doesn't make you cynical, it makes you accurate. You begin seeing situations for what they are, not what your mind is trying to turn them into. And something shifts in the way people respond to you. Your arguments become sharper, your decisions more grounded, your opinions harder to shake because they're built on examined thought rather than automatic bias. You stop falling into the traps others stumble into blindly. You begin navigating conversations, conflicts, and relationships with a level of mental steadiness that unsettles those who don't understand their own minds. Knowing your biases is not about perfection. It's about refusing to let unseen forces dictate who you are. Stay curious. Staying curious is the decision to keep your mind alive in a world where most people let theirs slowly die. Curiosity is the spark that pulls you beyond the obvious, the force that pushes you to ask questions others never think to ask. When you stay curious, you refuse to accept the world at face value. You dig deeper, explore further, and challenge the limits placed on your understanding. Curiosity turns every experience, good or bad, into a doorway, every person into a lesson, every moment into something worth examining. It is the antidote to stagnation, the fuel of intelligence, the heartbeat of a mind that refuses to settle. Emotionally, staying curious is powerful because it brings wonder back into your life. You begin noticing things you once overlooked, feeling alive in places where others feel numb. You stop pretending you know everything and start embracing the thrill of not knowing. That humility opens your mind to new ideas, new perspectives, and new possibilities that ego would have blocked. Curiosity softens you in some ways, but sharpens you in others. It makes you more open but far harder to manipulate because you're driven by discovery, not by pride or fear. And people can sense it. They see the brightness in your eyes, the way you ask questions that go past small talk and scrape at truth. They feel the energy of someone who is mentally awake, someone who is always expanding, someone who refuses to become rigid and predictable. Staying curious builds a mind that never stops growing, a mind that surprises people, a mind that becomes stronger because it never stops exploring the world or itself. Seek simplicity. Seeking simplicity is the decision to stop drowning in unnecessary complication and instead chase the clarity that most people are too overwhelmed to find. Complexity is seductive. It makes you feel intelligent, important, impressive, but it often hides confusion. Simplicity, on the other hand, forces you to understand things at their core. When you strip away the noise, the extra steps, the cluttered thoughts, you confront the truth directly, and that confrontation feels both liberating and unsettling. It reveals how much of your life has been tangled in things that never mattered. Emotionally, simplicity demands courage. It requires you to let go of habits, relationships, beliefs, and routines that only exist to fill space rather than serve purpose. It pushes you to cut through your own excuses, to acknowledge what is essential and what is distraction. This clarity is uncomfortable because it shines a bright light on how much mental chaos you've been tolerating. But once you taste the relief that comes from simplifying, you start craving it. Simplicity sharpens your decisions. It strengthens your focus. It frees your mind from constant noise so your thoughts can actually breathe. People feel this shift in you, the way you speak more directly, move more deliberately, think more cleanly. Your presence becomes lighter but stronger, quiet but powerful. Seeking simplicity doesn't make life smaller, it makes life clearer. It gives you the mental space to grow, the emotional space to feel, and the psychological space to become someone whose mind isn't cluttered with noise but aligned with purpose. Think long-term thinking. Long-term is the decision to lift your gaze above the chaos of the moment and commit to a future that most people are too distracted, impatient, or fearful to build. The world trains you to crave immediacy, quick rewards, fast validation, instant results, because short-term thinking keeps you reactive, predictable, and easily controlled. But when you shift your mind toward the long arc of your life, everything changes. You stop chasing impulses and start choosing actions that compound. You stop living for the next hour and start strategizing for the next decade. This perspective creates a level of stability and purpose that feels foreign to people stuck in the cycle of instant gratification. Long-term thinking forces you to confront who you're becoming, not just who you are right now. It pushes you to make hard choices, delayed pleasure, sustained discipline, intentional sacrifice, because you understand the payoff isn't immediate but inevitable. This mindset builds patience, resilience, and emotional maturity. It quiets the panic that comes from temporary discomfort and replaces it with the confidence of someone who knows exactly where they're going. People notice this. They sense the calm in your decisions, the strategy behind your actions, the grounded certainty of someone who isn't thrown off course by small setbacks. Thinking long-term makes you intimidating because you no longer move based on moods or pressure. You move based on vision. Your life becomes a deliberate construction, not an accident. And while others burn themselves out chasing temporary highs, you're building something that lasts. Slowly, quietly, powerfully. Tolerate ambiguity. Tolerating ambiguity is the decision to stay steady in the spaces where most people mentally unravel. Human beings crave certainty because it feels safe, clean, and predictable, but life rarely offers that clarity. Instead, it hands you unanswered questions, unclear outcomes, shifting circumstances, and moments where nothing makes sense yet. When you learn to tolerate ambiguity, you train your mind to remain calm in the fog. You stop rushing to force meaning where there isn't any. Stop panicking when the path isn't obvious. Stop grasping for instant answers just to soothe your discomfort. Ambiguity is where real growth happens. It's the space between who you were and who you're becoming, the tension between the information you have and the clarity you want. Most people escape it by making impulsive decisions, clinging to false certainty, or numbing themselves with distractions. But you choose to stand in it. You choose to let the unknown breathe. And in that stillness, your intuition sharpens, your patience grows, and your understanding deepens in ways rushed clarity could never teach you. As you build this tolerance, something powerful begins to shift inside you. Anxiety loosens its grip because you no longer treat uncertainty as danger. Your thinking becomes layered, flexible, adaptable. You stop breaking under pressure because you've trained yourself to operate in the gray areas where others freeze. People around you feel this stability. They sense your calm, your capacity to navigate confusion without collapsing, your quiet confidence in moments that make others frantic. Tolerating ambiguity turns you into someone who doesn't need the world to be certain in order to move forward. Challenge beliefs. Challenging your beliefs is the moment you step into the battlefield of your own mind and confront the ideas you've carried for years without ever questioning their origin. Most people cling to their beliefs as if they are sacred artifacts, forgetting that many of them were inherited, not chosen. They come from family, culture, fear, or childhood survival, and yet they shape adult decisions with invisible authority. When you challenge your beliefs, you rip the curtain back on those mental frameworks. You ask the uncomfortable questions. Why do I think this? Who taught me this? Does this belief strengthen me or limit me? This interrogation feels destabilizing at first, almost like shaking the foundation you stand on, but that discomfort is where real intelligence begins. Emotionally, the process is intense. It forces you to confront the possibility that parts of your identity were built on assumptions, insecurities, or outdated versions of yourself. It makes you face the terrifying truth that you might have been wrong and that your mind may need to evolve. But on the other side of that fear is a freedom most people never reach, the freedom to think independently rather than blindly repeating inherited narratives. As you challenge your beliefs, you grow sharper, less reactive, and far more self-aware. You stop being predictable. You stop being easily influenced. You stop letting old stories dictate your future. People notice the shift. They sense the depth in your reasoning, the clarity in your presence, the strength in someone who rebuilds their mind instead of hiding behind it. Challenging your beliefs doesn't destroy you. It reshapes you into someone far more powerful than the person you were before. Face your fears. Facing your fears is the moment you stop letting invisible forces dictate the borders of your life. Fear is not the enemy. It is the compass pointing directly at the places where your growth has been waiting for you. Most people run from the things that scare them, believing avoidance keeps them safe, but all it truly does is shrink their world. Every unchallenged fear becomes a quiet prison, locking away your confidence, your potential, your identity. When you turn toward what terrifies you, even trembling, you begin breaking walls that have held you for years. The emotional impact of facing fear is unlike anything else. Your heart pounds, your mind panics, your body wants to retreat, but underneath that chaos is a truth most people never experience. Fear loses its power when you walk toward it instead of away. The moment you confront what you thought would destroy you, you feel the shock of survival, the spark of strength, the realization that you were always more capable than you believed. That moment changes you. Each fear you face becomes a piece of armor you earn. Your confidence stops being theoretical and becomes embodied. Your presence shifts. You stand differently, speak differently, live differently. People sense it immediately. The steadiness of someone who knows their fear but refuses to kneel to it. Facing your fears doesn't eliminate them. It transforms your relationship with them. Fear becomes a signal, not a stop sign, a challenge, not a cage. And the more you confront, the more you grow into the version of yourself who is no longer guided by avoidance, but by courage. Journal conflicts. Journaling conflicts is the act of dragging the chaos in your mind out into the light, where it can no longer twist itself into confusion and emotional distortion. Most people carry their conflicts, arguments, fears, resentments, misunderstandings like tangled knots inside their heads. Thoughts loop, emotions intensify, and small problems grow into storms simply because they were never examined. But when you journal a conflict, when you write out what happened, what you felt, what you feared, and what you wished you'd done, something powerful happens. The knot begins to loosen. The moment ink hits paper, the situation becomes clearer, smaller, more manageable. Writing forces honesty. It exposes the exaggerations your mind created, the assumptions you made, the wounds that influenced your reactions. It reveals patterns you repeat without noticing. Defensiveness, avoidance, aggression, self-blame. Journaling becomes a mirror that reflects not just the conflict, but your role in it, your triggers, your insecurities. This kind of self-awareness is uncomfortable, even painful, because it removes your ability to hide behind emotional fog, but it also liberates you. It gives you the power to respond differently next time, to communicate more clearly, to understand others with more depth. People feel this evolution in you. They notice the way you handle disagreements with clarity instead of chaos, with intention instead of impulse. You become harder to provoke, harder to confuse, harder to manipulate, because you've already confronted your internal battles on the page. Journaling conflicts turns emotional turbulence into insight, and that insight becomes a quiet strength that changes how you face every future storm. Protect your routines. Protecting your routines is the decision to guard the structure that holds your life together, even when the world tries to pull you in every direction. Most people treat their routines as optional, something they follow only when it's convenient or when motivation is high. But when you protect your routines fiercely, they transform from simple habits into the backbone of your identity. Your routines become the silent architecture that keeps you grounded when everything else feels chaotic. They give your mind a sense of stability, direction, and control that most people never experience because they allow every distraction, every request, every impulse to hijack their day. Emotionally, protecting your routines is powerful because it forces you to honor yourself. It means saying no to people who drain you, no to activities that derail you, no to impulses that weaken you. It's a declaration that your growth matters, that your time matters, that your mind matters. At first, this discipline feels selfish, even harsh, but over time, it becomes liberating. You begin to trust yourself more because your actions finally align with your intentions. You start feeling safer within your own structure, supported by habits that keep you sharp, steady, and evolving. People notice this shift too. They see the consistency in your energy, the discipline in your choices, the focus in your presence. You become harder to pull off track, harder to manipulate, harder to distract. Protecting your routines turns you into someone who doesn't rise and fall with emotion or circumstance. You move with purpose, with rhythm, with a quiet strength that comes from knowing your life is built on foundations no one else controls. Prioritize ruthlessly. Prioritizing ruthlessly is the act of drawing a hard line between what moves your life forward and what merely keeps you busy. Most people drown in obligations they never truly chose, tasks that feel urgent but mean nothing, responsibilities inherited from guilt, fear, or habit. Their days are filled, yet their lives go nowhere. But when you start prioritizing with ruthless clarity, you confront the truth that not everything deserves your time, your attention, or your energy. That realization is jarring because it exposes how much of your life has been spent serving noise instead of purpose. Emotionally, this shift hits like a shockwave. You begin to see the difference between what is important and what is comfortable, between what is necessary and what is familiar. And choosing what truly matters forces you to make cuts that feel harsh but liberating. You stop saying yes to everything. You stop apologizing for protecting your time. You stop sacrificing your future for the comfort of pleasing others. This is when people start calling you selfish, not because you are harming anyone, but because you are no longer available for their distractions. As your priorities sharpen, your life begins to align. Your actions finally match your goals. Your energy goes to what actually builds you. Your progress accelerates in a way that feels almost unfair. People notice the difference too. They feel the intensity of someone who is intentional, focused, and unbothered by the trivial. Prioritizing ruthlessly doesn't make your world smaller. It makes it sharper. It transforms your days from scattered reactions into deliberate steps, giving you the power to build a life that reflects your purpose instead of your distractions. Remove drama. Removing drama is the moment you decide that your peace is more valuable than the chaos others try to pull you into. Most people are addicted to drama without realizing it, addicted to emotional spikes, to conflict that makes them feel important, to problems that distract them from their own unresolved lives. But when you remove drama, you strip away all the noise that thrives on reaction, exaggeration, and emotional volatility. You begin seeing how much energy you've wasted on people who mistake turmoil for connection, crises for attention, and conflict for relevance. Once you step back, the world looks different. You start recognizing the patterns, how some people create chaos to avoid responsibility, how others use drama to manipulate sympathy, how many situations only escalate because someone needed to feel powerful. And as you detach, your mind becomes clearer, calmer, sharper. You stop engaging in conversations meant to provoke. You stop feeding situations designed to drain you. You stop letting other people's emotional storms spill into your internal space. The shift is profound. Drama no longer entertains you because stability feels stronger. You start valuing quiet clarity over loud conflict. You become more selective with your time, your reactions, your presence. And people notice. Those who thrived on your emotional availability suddenly lose their grip. Those who relied on chaos to control you find nothing to hold on to. Your life becomes lighter, your decisions more intentional, your emotions less tangled. Removing drama doesn't make you detached, it makes you powerful. You stop participating in chaos you didn't create, and in that boundary, your mind becomes a place where only truth, focus, and peace are allowed to live. No urgent versus important. Knowing the difference between urgent and important is the mental shift that separates those who simply stay busy from those who actually move their lives forward. Most people live trapped in urgency, responding to every notification, every request, every problem that demands attention in the moment. Urgency feels loud, pressing, unavoidable, and it tricks you into believing you're being productive while your real priorities quietly decay in the background. But when you learn to distinguish the urgent from the important, you reclaim control over your time, your energy, and your direction. You stop letting life drag you by the wrist and start directing your days with intention. Important tasks are the ones that shape your future, building skills, nurturing relationships, improving your health, creating stability, pursuing long-term goals. They're quiet. They don't scream for attention, and that's why most people ignore them until it's too late. But when you deliberately elevate importance above urgency, you begin living with clarity instead of chaos. Your days stop feeling frantic. Your mind stops feeling scattered. You start choosing actions that compound instead of actions that merely keep you afloat. People notice this shift. They see how you move with purpose while they chase distractions. They sense your groundedness, your priorities, your refusal to be controlled by the noise everyone else answers to without thinking. Knowing urgent versus is important makes your life feel cleaner, your decisions sharper, and your path clearer. It creates a level of discipline and maturity that most never develop, and it positions you to build a life driven by vision instead of pressure, direction instead of panic. Don't over-explain. Not over-explaining is the moment you reclaim your power from the need to justify your every choice, emotion, or boundary. Most people spill explanations because they crave approval. They want to be understood, accepted, or validated by everyone around them. But every unnecessary explanation is a quiet surrender of your confidence. It signals doubt, insecurity, and fear of being judged. When you stop over-explaining, you send a different message. I trust myself. I trust my decisions. I don't need permission to exist as I am. That internal certainty changes the entire atmosphere around you. Emotionally, this shift hits hard because it forces you to confront the uncomfortable truth that much of your talking has been an attempt to avoid rejection. You realize how often you've softened your words, lengthened your reasoning, or diluted your truth just to keep others comfortable. But when you stop doing that, you step into a cleaner, stronger way of living. Your words become intentional. Your presence becomes heavier. You begin to speak with a clarity that doesn't bend under pressure, and people feel the difference immediately. They sense that you're not seeking their approval, not chasing their understanding, not negotiating your worth in real time. Your boundaries become sharper. Your confidence becomes quieter. Your energy becomes more controlled. You stop being someone who needs to be defended and become someone who simply is. Not over-explaining doesn't make you cold or distant. It makes you self-possessed. It teaches you that the right people don't need long explanations, and the wrong people won't believe them anyway. It frees your mind from the exhausting habit of constantly proving yourself, allowing your strength to speak louder than your words ever could. Read opposing views. Reading opposing views is the decision to step outside the warm comfort of your own beliefs and willingly walk into territory that challenges you. Most people surround themselves with ideas that echo their own because agreement feels safe, familiar, validating. But growth doesn't live in agreement. It lives in friction. When you expose yourself to perspectives that contradict your own, you force your mind to stretch, to question, to evaluate, to sharpen. It is uncomfortable, sometimes even infuriating, because it threatens the identity you've built around what you think you know. But that discomfort is the very reason it's powerful. Emotionally, this practice pulls you into the parts of your mind you usually avoid, the uncertainty, the insecurity, the possibility that you might be wrong. You feel the ego resist, clinging to its old conclusions, terrified of collapse. But when you push past that resistance, something extraordinary happens. You begin seeing the world with more depth, more nuance, more empathy. You stop viewing others as enemies and start understanding the complex experiences that shape their beliefs. This shift makes you mentally dangerous in the best way possible. You're no longer trapped in intellectual bubbles. You can debate without hostility, question without fear, understand without agreeing. People feel this balance when they speak to you, the rare ability to stand firm in your own reasoning while respecting perspectives that challenge it. Reading opposing views doesn't weaken your beliefs. It strengthens them by testing them. It turns your mind into something flexible yet unbreakable, a mind that seeks truth, not comfort, and evolves through challenge rather than praise. Practice Stoicism. Practicing Stoicism is the decision to build an inner world so steady that nothing external can bend it. It is the discipline of separating what you can control from what you cannot, and refusing to let your peace be dictated by forces outside your command. Most people live at the mercy of circumstances. They panic when things shift, react when emotions rise, and crumble when life becomes unpredictable. But when you practice Stoicism, you rise above that chaos. You train your mind to stay still while the world moves violently around you. You learn to observe your emotions without being owned by them, to feel deeply without losing clarity, to respond intelligently instead of reacting impulsively. Emotionally, Stoicism is transformative because it forces you to confront your own fragility. You begin noticing how often your suffering comes not from events, but from the stories you attach to them. You learn to detach without disconnecting, to endure without hardening, to remain compassionate without becoming controlled by your feelings. This balance creates a quiet, powerful strength, a strength that doesn't need to be loud to be felt. People sense this change immediately. They see the calm in your eyes, the patience in your tone, the way pressure doesn't distort you, the way it distorts others. You become the person others look to when things fall apart, not because you're emotionless, but because you're anchored. Practicing Stoicism turns your mind into a fortress, steady, intentional, and immune to the chaos that consumes those who have never learned to master themselves. Decide by principles. Deciding by principles is the act of building your life on a foundation strong enough that emotion, pressure, and chaos can't knock you off course. Most people make choices based on whatever they feel in the moment: fear, excitement, insecurity, guilt, impulse. Their decisions shift with their moods, and because moods are unstable, their lives become unstable too. But when you choose to anchor your decisions in principles, clear, deeply held values that don't change with circumstance, you create a level of internal stability that is rare and unmistakable. You stop reacting and start governing yourself. Principles act as a compass when situations become blurry. They cut through the noise, the temptation, the panic, and force you to ask a different question. Not, what feels good right now, but what aligns with who I am becoming? This shift is powerful. It exposes how often you've betrayed yourself for comfort, how often you've let short-term emotions sabotage long-term outcomes. But it also gives you the strength to stop, to choose integrity over impulse, to choose growth over ease, to choose the harder path because it's the right one, not the convenient one. People feel this certainty in you. They sense the calm force behind your decisions, the consistency in your actions, the quiet confidence of someone who isn't swayed by pressure or manipulation. Living by principles makes you unpredictable to those who rely on emotional triggers and incredibly reliable to those who value strength. It builds a character that others respect even fear, because you become someone who cannot be bought, swayed, or shaken by whatever moment you're standing in. Learn from criticism. Learning from criticism is the shift from taking things personally to using them powerfully. Most people hear criticism and immediately armor up. They defend, deny, or distract themselves from the possibility that someone else might be seeing a truth they've been avoiding. Their ego flares, their emotions hijack their logic, and the entire moment becomes a battlefield. But when you choose to learn from criticism instead, you enter a different level of mental strength. You stop hearing criticism as an attack and start hearing it as information, raw, uncomfortable, revealing information that can expose your blind spots and accelerate your growth in ways comfort never will. Emotionally, this transformation cuts deep. It forces you to confront the parts of you that fear being wrong, the parts that rely on praise to feel worthy, the parts that equate correction with rejection. But once you push past that initial sting, criticism becomes a mirror you're no longer afraid to look into. You begin separating your identity from your flaws. You start appreciating the honesty most people run from, and you grow faster because you're no longer protecting your weaknesses, you're improving them. People feel this change in you. They sense the steadiness in someone who listens without defensiveness, who adjusts without sulking, who uses even harsh feedback as fuel instead of a wound. You become harder to insult, harder to shake, harder to undermine, because a mind that learns from criticism cannot be broken by it. Learning from criticism doesn't make you submissive, it makes you unstoppable. You evolve in the very areas others stay stuck in, turning every uncomfortable truth into another edge that sharpens you. Be disciplined, not loud. Being disciplined instead of loud is the decision to let your actions speak with a force your words could never match. Loud people crave attention. Disciplined people earn respect. Most individuals talk endlessly about what they're going to do, how motivated they feel, how big their plans are, but their lives remain unchanged because noise replaces effort. Discipline is different. Discipline is quiet, steady, almost invisible to the outside world, yet it builds a foundation of strength that people can feel the moment you walk into a room. When you choose discipline, you stop announcing your intentions and start proving them. This shift is emotionally intense because discipline exposes you to yourself. It shows you every excuse you've ever used, every promise you've ever broken, every dream you've postponed. It forces you to confront the gap between who you claim to be and who you actually are. That honesty stings, but it is transformative. Each day you follow through, especially when you don't feel like it, you rebuild trust with yourself. Your identity shifts from someone who hopes to someone who executes. People notice this change long before you speak about it. Your presence gains weight. Your consistency becomes intimidating. You become someone whose silence is more powerful than others shouting. Someone who doesn't need to broadcast their grind because the results reveal everything. Being disciplined, not loud, turns you into a person of substance in a world obsessed with appearances. It makes you unstoppable because your progress no longer depends on motivation or validation. It depends on your willingness to show up quietly, relentlessly, until your actions are undeniable. Reward effort. Rewarding effort is the moment you stop waiting for perfection to validate you and start valuing the work you put into becoming better. Most people only celebrate results, wins, achievements, recognition, and because of that, they live in constant disappointment. They chase outcomes that take months or years while ignoring the small daily battles that actually shape their character. But when you begin rewarding effort, everything changes. You start acknowledging the discipline it took to show up, the courage it took to try, the resilience it took to keep going when no one was watching. Effort becomes the proof of who you're becoming, not the scoreboard of what you've achieved. Emotionally, this shift is profound. Rewarding effort heals the parts of you that learn to tie your worth to success. It quiets the inner critic that tells you you're not doing enough. It allows you to build momentum instead of burning out. When you recognize your effort, you begin to feel proud of yourself before results arrive, and that pride becomes fuel. You start stacking small wins, reinforcing habits, and creating a loop of self-respect that strengthens you from the inside out. People notice this transformation. They see your consistency, your grounded confidence, your ability to stay motivated when others quit. You no longer crumble under slow progress or setbacks because your validation comes from the work, not the outcome. Rewarding effort trains your mind to stay committed, resilient, and focused, and that mentality makes you unstoppable long before the world sees your results. Build systems. Building systems is the moment you stop relying on motivation, mood, and willpower, those unstable forces that disappear the second life becomes inconvenient, and start constructing a life that runs on structure instead of chaos. Most people try to achieve their goals by sheer effort, pushing themselves with bursts of energy that burn out as quickly as they spark. They repeat the cycle of starting strong, slowing down, and quitting, convinced something is wrong with them. But nothing is wrong. The problem is that they're living without systems. A system turns effort into inevitability. It removes the need to feel like it and replaces it with processes that carry you forward even on your worst days. Systems take what you want and break it into behaviors so simple, so automatic, so inevitable that progress becomes the default rather than the exception. When you build a system, you free your mind from constant decision-making. You eliminate friction. You turn discipline into a habit instead of a battle. Suddenly, consistency stops being a struggle. It becomes a natural rhythm your life falls into. And with consistency comes power, the kind that compounds quietly over weeks, months, years. People notice the difference. They see the stability in your routines, the predictability in your results, the way you move forward without the dramatic highs and lows that exhaust everyone else. Systems make you efficient, reliable, and unshakable. They remove excuses, silence doubt, and transform your goals from fantasies into outcomes. When you build systems, you stop hoping to succeed. You start engineering it, and that shift changes everything. Win small daily. Winning small daily is the practice of building strength through tiny victories that compound into unstoppable momentum. Most people wait for massive breakthroughs, dramatic changes, or life-altering moments to feel successful. But breakthroughs rarely happen without the quiet, unglamorous wins that come long before them. When you commit to small daily victories, waking up on time, finishing a task you've avoided, choosing discipline over impulse, you begin rewriting the identity your mind believes about you. Each win becomes a message etched into your psychology. I follow through. I'm capable. I'm building something. Emotionally, this habit is powerful because it gives you constant proof of progress. In a world where people constantly feel behind, small wins anchor you. They remind you that forward movement doesn't have to be dramatic to be real. You begin to feel a subtle shift inside yourself. Your self-respect grows, your confidence strengthens, and your belief in your own potential becomes harder to shake. You stop needing motivation because your actions start building their own momentum. Over time, these small victories accumulate into something bigger, identity change. You become someone who expects progress, someone who behaves consistently, someone whose life isn't controlled by emotion, but by intention. People notice it long before you do. They see the stability in your routine, the quiet certainty in your actions, the strength in someone who doesn't wait for permission to improve. Winning small daily isn't about perfection. It's about direction. It's about proving to yourself over and over again that you are moving forward, even if the world hasn't noticed yet. Because eventually, those small wins turn into a life built on discipline, momentum, and unstoppable inner power. Limit negativity. Limiting negativity is the moment you stop allowing your mind to be poisoned by forces that drain your energy. distort your perspective, and weaken your spirit. Negativity is subtle. It hides in complaints disguised as conversations, in people who cling to misery as identity, in media designed to provoke outrage, in thoughts you repeat so often they feel like truth. Most people don't realize how deeply negativity infiltrates their inner world until they feel constantly exhausted, frustrated, or hopeless without knowing why. But when you begin limiting this mental toxicity, you reclaim emotional territory you never knew you lost. The emotional impact of this shift is powerful. You start noticing how certain people darken your mood within minutes, how certain habits suffocate your motivation, how certain environments make your mind shrink instead of expand. This awareness hurts because it forces you to acknowledge how much you've tolerated just to avoid discomfort or conflict. But honesty becomes liberation. As you distance yourself from negativity, something remarkable happens. Your mind begins to breathe. Thoughts become lighter, clearer, more optimistic, not because life suddenly became perfect, but because you stopped feeding the darkness. Your emotional resilience increases, your creativity returns, your inner calm strengthens. People notice the change too. They feel the increasing stability in you, the warmth, the groundedness that comes from refusing to let negativity define your internal world. Limiting negativity doesn't mean pretending everything is positive. It means protecting your mental environment with the same seriousness you protect your physical one. It means choosing peace over drama, truth over fear, possibility over pessimism. And as your inner world grows cleaner, your outer world begins to transform with it. Turn envy into fuel. Turning envy into fuel is the moment you stop letting other people's success shrink you and start using it to ignite something powerful inside yourself. Envy is a natural emotion, but most people let it rot them from the inside, turning admiration into bitterness, inspiration into insecurity. They look at someone winning and feel smaller, weaker, behind. But when you transform envy into fuel, you flip the entire script. You take that sharp, uncomfortable feeling in your chest and convert it into motivation, discipline, and fire. Instead of asking, why them, you start asking, why not me? That single shift takes envy from a poison to a catalyst. Emotionally, this transformation is raw. It forces you to confront the part of you that knows you could be doing more, the part that resents not others' success, but your own unrealized potential. Envy becomes a mirror, one that reflects everything you're capable of but haven't committed to yet. And instead of running from that mirror, you lean into it. You let it wake you up. You let it hurt just enough to push you forward. As you master this skill, your entire energy changes. You stop envying people and start studying them. You stop resenting success and start building your own. People feel the shift. They sense the ambition behind your calmness, the focus behind your silence, the determination in your eyes. Turning envy into fuel makes you dangerous in the best way, because it transforms an emotion that once weakened you into one that propels you forward with unstoppable momentum. Study yourself under pressure. Studying yourself under pressure is the act of watching your mind in the moments when its mask falls off and its true nature is exposed. Anyone can appear calm, confident, and collected when life is smooth, but pressure strips away the performance. It shows you who you really are, your instincts, your fears, your triggers, your strengths, and the parts of you that still need refining. Most people run from these moments, blaming the situation instead of examining themselves. But when you choose to observe your reactions instead of hiding from them, you gain a kind of self-knowledge that is raw, honest, and impossible to obtain in comfort. Pressure reveals patterns you'd never notice otherwise. The way your voice changes, the way your thoughts speed up or freeze, the way your emotions take over before logic can speak. When you study this instead of shame yourself for it, you begin understanding the architecture of your mind. You learn what destabilizes you, what calms you, what strengthens you. You start seeing the difference between who you pretend to be and who you truly are. That honesty is uncomfortable, but it is also transformative, because once you know your pressure point weaknesses, you can train them. You can rebuild yourself with intention. People who don't study themselves under pressure remain fragile, unaware of the internal landmines controlling their behavior. You, however, become someone different, someone who doesn't crack the same way twice, someone who evolves with every stressful moment, someone whose composure grows deeper each time life tries to break it. Studying yourself under pressure turns adversity into intelligence, and that intelligence becomes a power most people never develop. Think independently. Thinking independently is the moment you stop letting the world think for you. Most people absorb beliefs, opinions, and values without ever questioning where they came from. They follow trends, echo the loudest voices, and cling to the safety of group approval because standing alone feels risky. But when you choose to think independently, you step out of that mental herd. You begin forming conclusions based on your own logic, your own experiences, your own observations. This shift is terrifying at first because it strips away the comfort of belonging, but it also awakens a level of clarity and strength that imitation can never give you. Emotionally, independent thought demands courage. It forces you to confront the possibility that your mind may take you places others won't understand, won't support, or won't applaud. It requires you to tolerate being different, being doubted, even being rejected. But as you push through that discomfort, your inner voice grows louder, steadier, and sharper. You start trusting your instincts more than the noise. You stop seeking validation and start seeking truth. You realize your thoughts don't need permission to exist. Over time, people feel the difference in you. There's a weight to your presence, a depth to your reasoning, a calmness in your choices. You become harder to sway, harder to manipulate, harder to confuse. Others notice that your opinions aren't recycled, they're crafted. Your insights aren't borrowed, they're earned. Thinking independently doesn't isolate you, it elevates you. It turns your mind into a place of originality, strength, and authenticity in a world where most people have never truly met their own thoughts. Guard your attention. Guarding your attention is the realization that your mind is the most valuable resource you own, and everything in the world is fighting to steal it. Most people drift through their days with their focus scattered, hijacked by notifications, noise, crises that aren't theirs, and people who treat their time like it's disposable. They don't notice the cost until their thoughts feel fragmented, their goals feel distant, and their energy feels drained by things that never mattered. Guarding your attention is the moment you take that power back. It is the decision to stop offering your mental space to anything that hasn't earned it. Emotionally, this shift is disruptive. You begin to see how easily you've been distracted, manipulated, or derailed by constant interruptions. You recognize the guilt that kept you from saying no, the habits that pulled you into autopilot, the environments that made it impossible to think deeply. This awareness stings. It forces you to confront how much of your potential you've leaked away. But in that sting, strength begins to form. When you guard your attention, your mind sharpens, your thoughts grow more deliberate, your focus more intense, your inner world more stable. You stop reacting to every disturbance and start choosing what deserves space. People notice the shift instantly. Your presence becomes harder to access, harder to influence, harder to distract. You move with intention, not impulse. Guarding your attention isn't about ignoring the world. It's about refusing to let it own you. Once you feel the clarity that comes from protecting your mental space, you stop giving it away carelessly. You begin using your focus like a weapon, directing it only toward the things that build you, strengthen you, and move your life forward. Practice gratitude. Practicing gratitude is the choice to shift your mind from scarcity to strength, from what's missing to what's already supporting you. Most people rush through life blind to the things that keep them alive, grounded, and growing. They focus so intensely on what they don't have that they become numb to what they do. But when you practice gratitude intentionally, you rewire your brain to notice the moments, people, and opportunities that would otherwise disappear into the background. Gratitude doesn't make you soft, it makes you aware. It sharpens your ability to see the good even when life feels heavy, and that awareness becomes a form of emotional resilience that most people never develop. Emotionally, gratitude is transformative because it interrupts the mind's spiral into negativity. It forces you to pause long enough to recognize the strength you've built, the challenges you've survived, and the blessings you've taken for granted. You begin to feel a quiet warmth inside your chest, a calm that comes from realizing that even in your hardest seasons, life has been giving you more than you ever acknowledged. Gratitude gives you perspective, and perspective gives you power. People feel the difference in you. You become lighter without being naive, grounded without being rigid, calm without being detached. Your presence becomes comforting because it radiates appreciation instead of bitterness or entitlement. Practicing gratitude doesn't mean ignoring your struggles. It means refusing to let them define your entire world. It builds a mind that stays open, steady, and strong, even when circumstances try to pull you into darkness. Control what you can. Controlling what you can is the discipline of pulling your power back from the chaos of life and placing it in the only place it has ever truly mattered: your own actions, your own choices, your own responses. Most people waste their energy trying to control circumstances, outcomes, and other people, drowning themselves in frustration over forces that were never theirs to command. This obsession with the uncontrollable leaves them anxious, reactive, and constantly disappointed. But when you shift your focus to what is within your influence, something inside you stabilizes. You stop scattering your strength and start sharpening it. This mindset forces clarity. It exposes how much of your stress comes from fighting battles that don't belong to you. It reminds you that you may not control events, but you always control how you interpret them, how you respond to them, and who you become because of them. That realization is liberating. It turns helplessness into agency, chaos into direction, and fear into strategy. You begin to take responsibility not for the world, but for yourself. And that is where your real power has always lived. People feel this shift in you. They see the steadiness in your emotions, the maturity in your decisions, the unshakable calm of someone who no longer tries to bend reality to their will, but instead bends themselves to meet reality with strength. Controlling what you can doesn't make life easier. It makes you harder to break. It turns your focus into a weapon, your discipline into armor, and your presence into something that commands respect without ever asking for it. Detach from outcomes. Detaching from outcomes is the moment you stop chaining your peace to things you cannot fully control. Most people live in a constant state of tension because their worth rises and falls with every result. Every success inflates them, every failure crushes them. Their identity hangs on outcomes like a fragile thread. But when you detach, you reclaim your power from this emotional roller coaster. You stop obsessing over what might happen and start focusing on what you can actually influence: your effort, your intention, your discipline, your presence. This shift doesn't make you passive, it makes you untouchable. Emotionally, detachment is one of the hardest practices because it forces you to confront how much of your anxiety comes from trying to control the uncontrollable. You begin noticing how often you tie your self-worth to achievements, praise, or external validation. Detaching feels like stepping into a void at first, a scary quiet where your ego no longer has results to cling to. But that quiet quickly becomes your strength. You learn to act without fear, to pursue goals without desperation, to give your best without losing yourself in the process. As you master this, something in your energy shifts. People sense the calm in you, the way you move without panic, decide without pressure, and persist without needing guarantees. You become harder to manipulate because no one can weaponize outcomes against you. You become more consistent because failure no longer shakes your identity. Detaching from outcomes turns your mind into a fortress, steady, intentional, and deeply grounded, because your power finally comes from who you are, not from what happens. Stay consistent. Staying consistent is the quiet, unglamorous force that separates those who dream from those who become. Most people crave results but collapse under the weight of repetition. They want progress without monotony, transformation without discipline, change without the grind. But consistency is the truth they cannot escape. It is the slow, steady drumbeat of effort that rewires your identity, strengthens your mind, and builds a life brick by brick while the rest of the world looks for shortcuts. When you choose consistency, you choose to become someone your past self wouldn't even recognize. Emotionally, this commitment is brutal. Consistency exposes your impatience, your excuses, your desire for instant validation. It forces you to show up on the days you feel empty, unmotivated, or unseen. It confronts you with the reality that motivation is temporary, but discipline is a decision you must make again and again. And in that repetition, especially when no one is watching, you forge a resilience that cannot be faked. You start becoming the person who doesn't break promises to themselves, the person who keeps going when others quit, the person whose progress is inevitable because it is built on steady effort, not fragile enthusiasm. People feel this shift in your presence. You become reliable, focused, grounded, a reminder of what it looks like when someone refuses to abandon their own potential. Staying consistent doesn't make life easier. It makes you unshakable. It builds a mind that moves forward no matter the weather, no matter the mood, no matter the excuses. And with every small action repeated over time, you become the kind of person whose results speak louder than any explanation ever could. Be unoffendable. Being unoffendable is the moment you stop giving strangers, critics, and passing comments the power to rewrite your emotions. Most people walk through life raw and reactive, letting every opinion slice into them, letting every misunderstanding bruise their ego. They crumble under assumptions, lash out at disrespect, and drown in the need to defend themselves. But when you choose to be unoffendable, you sever the strings that others use to pull your emotions. You stop taking things personally because you realize most people speak from their wounds, not from truth. Their words reveal them, not you. Emotionally, becoming unoffendable is liberating. You feel the weight of insecurity fall off your shoulders. You stop replaying conversations in your head, trying to decode tone and intention. You stop handing your peace to anyone who knows how to provoke you. Instead, you develop an inner stillness, an unshakable calm that refuses to bend for petty comments or passing negativity. That calm becomes a shield, not of coldness, but of mastery. You react with understanding instead of anger, curiosity instead of defensiveness, silence instead of chaos. People notice this instantly. They see that their insults don't move you, their assumptions don't shake you, and their attempts to provoke you fall flat. Your unreactivity unsettles them because it exposes their own emotional volatility. You become someone whose presence feels grounded, controlled, and quietly powerful. Being unoffendable isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about owning it so completely that no one else can weaponize it against you. Learn persuasion. Learning persuasion is the moment you stop relying solely on the strength of your ideas and start mastering the art of making others feel them too. Most people speak to be heard, not understood. They push their opinions with force, logic, or emotion, never realizing that persuasion is not about dominating someone's mind, it's about entering it. When you study persuasion, you learn to shape your message so it slips past defenses, resonates with desires, and aligns with the internal narrative people already believe about themselves. You stop fighting resistance and start guiding it. Persuasion begins with psychology. You learn what people crave: validation, certainty, belonging, and what they fear: rejection, confusion, loss. You start recognizing the emotional levers behind their decisions, often hidden even from themselves. And once you see these levers, communication becomes strategy. Every word, pause, and tone becomes intentional. You stop speaking randomly and start speaking in a way that makes people lean in, agree without realizing why, and feel understood on a level that disarms their skepticism. This skill is powerful because it shifts how the world responds to you. Doors open, conflicts soften, influence grows. People listen not because they have to, but because they want to. They sense the clarity in your voice, the precision in your reasoning, the subtle emotional intelligence behind your delivery. Learning persuasion doesn't turn you manipulative, it turns you effective. It gives your words weight, your presence impact, and your ideas the ability to travel from your mind into someone else's reality. And once you master that, you become someone whose communication doesn't just express, it transforms.